Chapter 699. The Immortal sect took the initiative to go to the mortal world to find disciples with suitable qualifications, rather than waiting for disciples with a heart to come to them. This was definitely a proposal that surprised all the sections. This was equivalent to lowering the face of the Immortal sect to the lowest level. In the eyes of outsiders, it even had a taste of humility. However, from another perspective, it was completely different. Actively looking for disciples meant that there were more choices than other sects, and they could find more disciples. Now who didn't know that if they wanted to improve the strength of the sect, they must have enough support from the younger generation of disciples. Otherwise, once the master ascended, there would be no successor, and the sect would definitely decline. Countless families had verified this point. The Xiang family that refined the heaven-seizing pill and Luo Yuan's family all proved this true from the reverse side. Whether it was the Taishaman, the Five Elements sect, or the Blue Cloud sect, the Green Jade Immortal Island, every big sect, without exception, showed that the successful sect always had a continuous emergence of masters, and there was almost never a time when the young were out of work. In other words, the more these junior disciples, the more outstanding they were, the better the sustainable development of the sect would be. The truth was easy to understand, but the face was not so easy to put down. This was also one of the reasons why the palace master was hesitant. Yang Chan saw that the palace master was still hesitating, and smiled, and said another reason. For a long time, those who can't become outer sect disciples will become slaves. But after all, there are also people who have cultivated, and they must be unwilling to be slaves. But if you let them return to the secular world to find disciples, maybe these people will be happy. Needless to say, those who became slaves would definitely be happy, although their cultivation base was not high. But if they returned to the mortal world, they would definitely be regarded as a master. Naturally, they could become a superior person. Compared to being a servant, it was not known how many times more comfortable it was. Who would not be willing? These disciples can be given a secular wealth, so that they can live a good life in the mortal world. Yang Chun continued. They are even allowed to choose a basic cultivation method to pass on to their descendants. But the premise is that they must find suitable disciples for the sect. At the same time, if their descendants want to continue their cultivation, they must enter the Chunyang Palace. In this way, Chunyang Palace doesn't even have to worry about finding disciples at all. At that time, the palace lord will definitely worry about another problem. What trouble? The head of the palace was thinking along with Yang Chen's thoughts and asked without hesitation. The problem is that there are too many outstanding disciples. It's not easy to arrange them. Yang Chen replied with a smile. Perhaps the palace master will stipulate that those with mediocre spiritual roots or below will not be accepted. In Yang Chen's memories from his previous life, this was the common method adopted by the Taoist sects later on. The Taishamen were so powerful that they forced the other sect members to give up their pride and start looking for suitable disciples. When the competition was intense, they would even interfere in the affairs of the human world in order to seize territory. However, this would only start after almost 1,000 years. It seemed a bit early for Yang Chun to mention it now. However, if there was really an advantage of 1,000 years, Chunyang Palace could definitely grow into a behemoth like the Taishamen. Putting aside the problems of face and tradition, when the head of the palace began to seriously consider the feasibility of this matter, he suddenly discovered that if Yang Chun really did what he said, Chunyang Palace could grow to what extent even the head of the palace couldn't imagine. The head of the palace couldn't help but get excited, and his breathing began to become heavy. The pressure of recruiting human race cultivators was much less than that of recruiting the monster race. If the Taishamen wanted to recruit the monster race, at least in the early stage, they would have to cut through thorns and thorns. However, if the Chunyang Palace recruited human beings, there was no such problem at all. At most, they would be ridiculed by other sects. Moreover, if the whole thing was done well, they could even get those disciples into their pocket without anyone knowing. At most, on the day of the opening of the mountain gate, they would go through the motions and re-recruit the disciples into the sect. It was too simple. He believed that the vast majority of those slaves were willing to choose to become the people of the mortal world under the constraints of the oath, rather than the slaves of the Tao sects. What's more, the sect did not cut off their hearts to seek the Tao. Although they could not achieve the Tao because of their qualifications, the future generations had more opportunities. To maintain the wealth of the world, the descendants had the opportunity to achieve the Tao. The only thing they had to pay was loyalty. Where could they find such a good thing? Moreover, the more beautiful they were, the stronger the Chunyang Palace would be in the future, and their families would become more and more prosperous. Only fools would not be willing. The more the head of the palace thought about it, the more excited he became, and it seemed that he could already see the situation of excellent disciples flying all over the sky in the future. Perhaps if this was really done, when the time came, the disciples of other sect who went to visit the mountain might be the leftover goods of the Chunyang Palace. Just imagining it could make people excited. It's a big deal. I have to discuss it with the elders. Despite the excitement, the head of the palace did not immediately agree, but to discuss it with the elders. In the face of Yang Chun, the head of the palace suddenly sighed with emotion. Yang Chun, whether this thing is successful or not, you are the most outstanding disciple of my sect. I intend to propose to the elders that you be the young palace master. What do you think? The young palace master. That was the next heir to the head of the palace. The head of the palace said this. He really did not know how to express his appreciation for Yang Chen's disciple. It's better not to be so ostentatious. At least the disciple can be safer. Yang Chun smiled and refused, using a reason that was not a reason. Believe me, the elders will definitely agree. The head of the palace did not give Yang Chun the opportunity to refuse. As for the publicity, the elders can set it first and not announce it to the public. Obviously, the head of the palace had made up his mind. In this regard, Yang Chun was also noncommittal. With or without the identity of the young palace master, Yang Chun would still do what he had to do. However, with this identity, a lot of things in the sect could be more relaxed. If the head of the palace could make up his mind, it would be the best. However, there was one thing that Yang Chun felt that he should still discuss with the head of the palace and ask his opinion. Palace master, if there is a benefit, but it needs to pay a heavy price to get it, should this disciple let the sect fight for it? Or let the news go out and let the Taishaman take the lead, and then let the Blue Cloud sect and the Green Jade Immortal Island pay their own price to get those benefits in exchange for more support and cooperation from my sect? Yang Chun asked about the disposal of the secret plane news brought by the consciousness of the Taishaman. Chapter 700. Will the sect stay, or will they release the news? The same question was raised again at the elders' meeting. Yang Chun faced the head of the palace and the elders. This question made everyone silent. It was another secret land. This news was a little too shocking for the elders. Yang Chun has discovered more than one secret plane, which everyone knows. But now openly using a secret plane as an investment to win over partners isn't a bit too much? Can't we collect it ourselves? Finally, after a long silence, Elder Zheng Feng, who was in charge of the Chunyang Palace warehouse, asked. This question may be the voice of everyone, but no one has the nerve to say it. As soon as Zheng Feng asked, Yang Chun saw the expectant eyes of almost all the elders. The price to be collected is very high. Yang Chun shook his head and said helplessly, if he didn't know that the Taishaman in his previous life had paid a big price for this, Yang Chun himself would be tempted. How much is the price? Gung Hong was anxious and asked directly. Of course, this was also a question that everyone else was interested in. The price of 3 to 4 masters of the Deshang stage. Yang Chun carefully recalled the experience of his previous life and finally gave his own judgment. In his previous life, after the Taishaman collected the secret plane, there were at least 3 masters of the Deshang stage who directly announced their retreat. Until Yang Chun ascended, they did not appear again. Presumably, even if they did not die, they paid a great price. When Yang Chun's answer came out, there was a sudden sound of a big cold breath. 3 or 4 masters of the Deshang stage. This was by no means what the Chunyang Palace could pay. Even if everyone here could be ruthless, the Chunyang Palace did not have so many masters to sacrifice them. The crowd was silent again, and no one said anything more. However, Everyone had the same thought. They were really unwilling. They needed to pay the price of 3 or 4 masters of the Dashang stage to get the resources of the secret plane. The value of the things inside could be imagined. The problem was that now the Chunyang Palace could not pay this price and could only watch the resources of the secret plane fall. Can you delay it for a while? Wait until the sect is strong, and then take it out? The newly appointed Elder Qiao Ming was originally the Hall Master of the Fierce Yang Hall, where Yang Chun was, and he was still the same. He just mentioned it, and it seemed that he was not sure. No! Yang Chun shook his head and sighed. I can only have 50 years at most. When the time is over, others will start. From Yang Chen's detonation of the greatest heaven sect's welcoming array to the present, it has been almost 20 years. The greatest heaven sect's centennial welcoming envoys could only have 80 years at most. However, considering the time needed to break through the secret plane, it would take another 30 years, so at most it would be 50 years. After that, it would be known by the Taishaman. Once the Taishaman knew the secret plane, if the Chunyang Palace wanted to do it again, they would be a mortal enemy. The Taishaman would definitely blame the destruction of the sect directly on the Chunyang Palace. Although it was not unjust, Yang Chun was not willing to have a direct dispute with the Taishaman when the Chunyang Palace was still weak. 100 years was not enough to level the distance between the Chunyang Palace and the Taishaman. If the Blue Cloud sect and the Green Jade Immortal Island know the news, would they think that we are causing trouble? Elder Su Qingxin was more cautious and participated in foreign affairs more, so he was more thoughtful. As long as the return is rich enough. Yang Chun replied very respectfully. In fact, in front of the elders, Yang Chun has always maintained a respectful attitude. Moreover, whether it is the Lord of Tantai or Sect Master Lu, they can't completely control the two sects. Maybe they also need an opportunity to let some disobedient guys have something to do. Yang Chen's words suddenly made several elders look at Yang Chen's eyes, and there was a kind of inexplicable meaning. Now Yang Chen was only a small Jidan stage disciple, but he could think so far ahead, and he could also make full use of some external opportunities to strengthen the strength of his allies. His future was indeed limitless. Fortunately, such a disciple was a member of the sect, and he had always been loyal to the sect. Otherwise, if he was really pushed to another sect by Chu Hong in the beginning, he didn't know how much regret these people present would have. Finally, after a long time, Zhu Qintao nodded and said, "If you really can't get in your hands, then let it go. It is better to take advantage of your allies than others. If you don't have such a big appetite, don't think about eating so much delicious food." After saying these words, Zhu Qintao even seemed to feel that he suddenly understood a lot of things, or he had experienced a test of temptation, and his mind was more solid. Suddenly, regardless of the elders' meeting, he stood up and saluted the crowd, and directly said, "I have some enlightenment. I will go into retreat." After Zhu Qintao finished, he turned around and walked away without looking back. The head of the palace was overjoyed and suddenly shouted, "Elder Zhu, wait a moment." Zhu Qintao, who was walking, stopped and turned around. He saw a white light flying towards him. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the white light that flew in front of him, but it was an unusually dense medicinal pill wrapped in a talisman. It was the second-grade questioning inner heart pill. He had some enlightenment in his heart, and when he was in retreat, he would take the second-grade questioning inner heart pill. The effect must be very good. Everyone saw this scene, and their hearts were full of envy. Although the second-grade questioning inner heart pill was not a precious thing at the level of the elders of the Pure Yang Palace, this was well known to everyone. However, this kind of opportunity to comprehend was rare. Everyone envied Zhu Qintao for having this opportunity. Since Elder Zhu Qintao had already expressed his position, everyone nodded after thinking about it. No one could say that this way of handling it was the best. Instead of wasting it in their hands, it was better to exchange it for the strength of their allies. At first, everyone couldn't let go of it. It was estimated that this kind of benefit was worth it after paying a huge price. But Zhu Qintao said that if you don't have such a big appetite, don't think about eating so much delicious food. Chunyang Palace did not have that strength, so it was better not to casually make this idea. In this case, let's do it according to this idea. In the end, it was the head of the palace who made the decision. However, everyone had made a choice, and this decision was very easy to make. The elders present were all open-minded people, and no one even asked Yang Chun about the news of this secret plane. It seemed that they were very relieved to hand it over to Yang Chun. Yang Chun, you come with me. After the elders dispersed, the head of the palace stayed in the same place for a while. After thinking for a moment, he said to Yang Chun, there were some things that had to be figured out in any case, so as not to be flustered after an accident in the future. Chapter 701. Following the head of the palace, Yang Chun came to the house selected by the head of the palace in the Immortal's cave. For convenience, the head of the palace had his own room in the palace group in several areas. Where they were now was where the Jidon stage was located. After a few restrictions, the head of the palace let Yang Chun sit down and asked very seriously, the news of the secret plane, where did it come from? Is it the Taishanmen? These things Yang Chun could not be concealed. When the head of the palace asked, Yang Chun nodded and admitted it. Seeing that Yang Chun admitted it, the head of the palace immediately frowned. If it was the news from the Taishanmen, then the Taishanmen must know that Yang Chun would pass the news to the Blue Cloud sect and the Green Jade Immortal Island, which could easily make people suspect Yang Chun. Isn't it too risky to do this? The head of the palace had some doubts about the feasibility of Yang Chun's idea. Once you let the Taishanmen know, the consequences were that the head of the palace did not say it, but Yang Chun also understood it. If the Taishanmen want to know, it will be 80 years later. The head of the palace was also concerned about Yang Chun. Yang Chun, of course, knew what was good and bad, and hurriedly explained this news was passed down from above. A clone of the lower realm? Of course, the head of the palace had heard of this magical technique, but the Chunyang Palace had never had this kind of skill. When he heard Yang Chun say that it was passed down from above, he suddenly understood. At the same time, the head of the palace was also deeply shocked. What kind of technique could make the formation of the Taishanmen explode? And he got the news from the lower realm. But the shock was the shock. The head of the palace did not ask Yang Chun. Everyone had their own secrets, and Yang Chun was no exception. The head of the palace directly attributed all of this to Yang Chun's extensive reading, the most powerful reason that could explain everything. Wouldn't it be harder to explain at that time? The mind of the head of the palace quickly returned to the business. It was fine to use tricks in the dark, but there had to be a perfect disguise. Otherwise, it would be suicidal. This kind of secret place is originally left for the fated person. Yang Chun smiled and then explained, the secret plane originally has a way of inheritance in the mortal world. What is passed down from above is only the location and the way to open the secret plane, as well as some sufficient warnings. Find a suitable opportunity to let the Taishanmen know of the existence of the secret plane. Everyone will fight fiercely, and we will just watch the show. Seeing that Yang Chun was confident, the head of the palace also breathed a sigh of relief and said, it is best not to show any traces. If you really can't, don't take risks. Yes, Palace Master. Yang Chun would certainly agree. In this kind of thing, Yang Chun was by no means a person who did not know what was good or bad. After agreeing to the head of the palace, Yang Chun suddenly remembered something and said, Palace Master, there are some things that I have to report to the Palace Master. Oh, what's the matter? Being able to let Yang Chun put it so solemnly, the head of the palace suddenly cared. In front of him, the sailing magic weapon of the Taishanmen appeared in front of the head of the palace. The water-splitting wings also appeared, plus the flying sword of the strong man, and some things in the Chinquan bag. Nothing was missing. This is... The head of the palace looked at these things in front of him, and suddenly felt dizzy. The style of the sailing ship and the water-splitting wings, the head of the palace had heard of it, but he had never seen it. But it suddenly appeared in front of him. The calm head of the palace could not help but be shocked. Is this the two things of the Taishanmen? After the head of the palace saw the sailing ship and the water-splitting wings, he turned his head directly to Yang Chun and asked. His face was inconceivable. Yang Chun did not answer, But the look on his face had fully explained that the judgment of the head of the palace was not wrong. "How did you get it?" The voice of the head of the palace had already trembled. Although several possibilities had flashed in his heart, no matter which possibility it was, he was not willing to see it. The 6 Yuanying stage ancestors of the Taishaman blocked the disciples on the sea. Yang Chun did not hide anything and directly said the process in the most concise way. As for the result, Yang Chun did not need to say anything more. The sailing ship and the water-splitting wings, as well as a pile of things here, the fate of the 6 Yuanying stage ancestors could be imagined. What did they want to do? The head of the palace was already angry and began to gnash his teeth. He asked this, but he knew better than anyone what the Taishaman wanted to do. The development of Yang Chun had already made the Taishaman feel threatened and even planned to secretly remove the excellent disciple of their own sect. Without Yang Chun's medicinal pills, Chunyang Palace would be directly beaten back to its original state. Even if there was some improvement compared to the past, it was not enough to become a qualitative change, and still could not pose a threat to the Taishaman. The head of the palace knew better than anyone the importance of Yang Chun to the sect, and even the people in the sect who understood that Yang Chun could stand side by side with Wang Yonggaoyu. Many of Yang Chun's secrets, such as what Yang Chun reported now, even the other elders might not know. Why did the Taishaman become the current situation, and Yang Chun could not get away from it? From the facts, the resentment, the other party was not looking for the wrong person, but the head of the palace still could not feel anger for the big sects like the Taishaman who actually did such a despicable thing. Good kill. The head of the palace couldn't help but praise in anger. This matter. If you need the sect to come forward, the sect will immediately send a note to the Taishaman. Even if it is the Taishaman, they can't plot against the disciples of my sect like this. The sect will come forward? Yang Chun directly shook his head like a rattle, refused and smiled. Why do we have to come forward? Now the most oppressed is not the disciple. It should be the many people in the Taishaman. Yang Chun was just plotted against, but he was not injured, but the other party lost 6 Yuanying stage ancestors. Presumably at this moment they did not know how to be distressed. As Yang Chun said, the most depressed at the moment was not Yang Chun. If you want to go out in the future, be careful. Safety is the first. The head of the palace knew that Yang Chun would not be bored in the sect, but he also knew that he could not persuade Yang Chun, but he solemnly reminded, when necessary, escape in embarrassment, save your life. As long as you are alive, there is no shame. Yes, palace master, Yang Chun promised, and then smiled. The disciple never felt that there was anything shameful about escaping. The dead have no face to lose. It's good that you understand. The head of the palace knew the temperament of Yang Chun, and no longer said this. He just looked at the pile of things in front of him and asked again, these things, how are you going to deal with them? The water-dividing wings disciple will keep it first. Maybe it will be useful. Yang Chun had long had a plan in mind, and quickly replied, this sailboat is also a rare flying magic weapon. It is better to let the ancestor change its appearance, and let the senior sister use it. Chapter 702. Giving things to Gong Sunling. This was the way Yang Chun had long thought of. His master Gaoyu already had a flying puppet refined from the corpse of the second city master, but there was no good flying magic weapon on Gong Sunling's side. Because of the relationship of the mountain river geographical map, Gong Sunling would go to many places in the future, and she also needed such a means of transportation. At least this sailboat could be compared with the current shuttle in terms of speed, which was a rare good thing. Of course, now this appearance could not be directly handed over to Gong Sunling. It must need a master to refine it again, not only to change the appearance, but also to add some defensive measures. Although the mountain river geographical map could add geographical graphics during the quenching, it could not be used to defend against the enemy, and it was necessary to let Gong Sunling have some self-protection. The Yuanying stage praying mantis puppet, Gong Sunling already had one, but after Yang Chun experienced this time being besieged by several Yuanying stage masters, he was also careful. He was not afraid of more protective things. Even if it was all over his body, Yang Chun would not dislike it. The matter of Yang Chun serving as the young palace master The palace master did not mention it to the elders this time. Perhaps it was because everyone was shocked by the secret plane, or perhaps it was inconvenient to consider the presence of Yang Chun. Yang Chun did not care about the identity of the young palace master, but the palace master could support himself like this. Yang Chun was also very grateful. For a long time, his Master Gao, you would be immersed in the refining of the life source flying sword. The dragon horn flying sword could not be refined without decades or hundreds of years. Therefore, for Gong Sunling to transform the sailboat, Yang Chun naturally found his master ancestor Wang Yong. Of course, Wang Yong was also a knowledgeable person, even without relying on the name of the sailboat. Just from the refining technique, he could see that it was the work of a master of Taishaman. After a simple question about what had happened, Wang Yong, who was also seething with anger, naturally agreed to Yang Chen's request. Although he could not directly vent his anger on the Taishaman, he was very willing to participate in making the Taishaman suffer a double loss. Gong Sunling did not understand, but the matter of Yang Chun asking Wang Yong to refine a flying magical weapon for her made Gong Sunling very moved. There had already been spiritual sense dual cultivation between the two, so although Gong Sunling was shy, she still pulled Yang Chun with a red face and pulled Yang Chun to her abode in the Immortal's cave. What made Yang Chun very surprised was that Gong Sunling did not know where to get a bunch of cooking utensils, and then let Yang Chun wait, but she was as happy as a little swallow, cooking a few dishes for Yang Chun in her own kitchen. This scene made Yang Chun really surprised. He did not know that when he accidentally mentioned that he liked wine and food, Gong Sunling kept it in mind, and even secretly went to the mortal city to learn a lot of techniques and practiced many times. This time, Gong Sunling used all her skills. For the first time, she cooked for her beloved junior brother. Gong Sunling even almost retreated. When she first met Yang Chun and gave her the geographical map of the mountains and rivers, Gong Sunling did not dare to show this intention in front of Gao Yu. This time, Yang Chun came to her alone, which gave her the opportunity and courage. With Gong Sunling's perception, when she concentrated on learning cooking, she soon surpassed the most advanced chefs of the mortals. In addition, she used spiritual power and some ingredients that mortals would not see at all. Even the royal chefs of several countries would feel ashamed in front of her. Several exquisite dishes were soon placed on the table, and Gong Sunling sat opposite Yang Chun happily. Looking at Yang Chen's surprised eyes, she suddenly worried in her heart. She didn't know if what she had cooked would suit Yang Chen's taste. Yang Chun was indeed shocked by Gong Sunling. Who would have thought that a cultivation genius would actually put down her cultivation for a long time and go to the mortal world to learn cooking? This thought really moved Yang Chun. For the taste of the food, Yang Chun did not pay so much attention. However, Yang Chun still underestimated the degree of Gong Sunling's evilness. A few dishes looked inconspicuous, but they were exceptionally delicious. With the Jade Dragon wine, it was a perfect match. Yang Chun almost swallowed his tongue during the meal. Yang Chun was happy to eat, and Gong Sunling was even happier. Her own hard work could make her beloved junior brother enjoy it so much. Then it was not in vain for such a long time to prepare carefully. After drinking with Yang Chun for a while, Gong Sunling asked Yang Chun about his next plans. This time, Yang Chun's return was temporary, just to send the magic weapon back for his master and senior sister to temper. He had long planned to collect the 7th metal true essence. Yang Chun did not hide this matter from Gong Sunling and said it directly. Of course, how did he know that there was 7th metal true essence there? Yang Chun did not elaborate, and Gong Sunling did not ask. Anyway, a well-read book was enough to explain all the unexplainable problems. You want to go to the territory of the demon sects? Listening to Yang Chun's destination, Gong Sunling couldn't help but be slightly surprised. However, she quickly recovered to normal. After a little thought, she suddenly asked, "Can I go with you? Go together?" Yang Chun was stunned for a moment. How did Gong Sunling suddenly think of going to the demon sect's territory? Is it just to be with him and not hesitate to take risks? Isn't the more places that the mountain river geographical map goes, the more complete the map and the more powerful it is? Gong Sunling saw that Yang Chun was a little stunned and explained with a smile. Anyway, you're not going to the demon sect's territory to fight and kill, just to collect things. On the way, I am also going to sacrificial refine the magic weapon. Gong Sunling's Mountain River geographical map has not yet become a life source magic weapon. It has not yet been sent into the sea of consciousness by Gong Sunling. However, the Mountain River geographical map has an advantage. Even if it has already started the quenching of the life source magic weapon, it will not delay to supplement and perfect the geography in the geographical map. And there is another advantage of the Mountain River geographical map. With this magic weapon, as long as you have been to a place, you will never get lost. Even in the maze, unless the level of the maze is higher than the level of the Mountain River geographical map. But for the time being, in the mortal world, this kind of thing will hardly happen. Gong Sunling wanted to go to the demon sect's territory to experience it. This reason was very reasonable. After Yang Chun thought for a moment, he finally agreed. Instead of letting Gong Sunling take the risk alone, it would be better for Yang Chun to accompany her. Anyway, it was on the way to the place where the seventh metal true essence was collected. Even if it was a shuttle, it would take a year to go back and forth. Such a large territory, adding it to the Mountain River geographical map would definitely make the Mountain River geographical map more powerful. Naturally, the benefits for Gong Sunling were also very huge. Chapter 703. However, before departure, Gong Sunling must complete the tempering of the Mountain River geographical map, which was also a very hard thing for Gong Sunling. In order to increase the success rate of Gong Sunling, Yang Chun even had a spiritual awareness double cultivation with Gong Sunling several times again. Although the direct improvement of Gong Sunling's spiritual awareness was not much, the conciseness of the spiritual awareness had been greatly enhanced, so that Gong Sunling's sacrificial refining of the Mountain River geographical map had a little more certainty. Waiting for Gong Sunling's time, Yang Chun did not waste it, but opened the furnace again and refined a large number of first-grade inner sensing pills. There were thousands of them. These inner sensing pills, Yang Chun gave more than half of them to the sect. Although the first-grade inner sensing pill was not enough to make people directly achieve the breakthrough effect of Qiao Ming and Su Qingxin, it could allow the cultivators of the Jiedan stage to thoroughly understand the internal situation of their body, and they could also detect the abnormalities in their own body. If the vast majority of the Jiedan stage masters could detect that something was wrong at the beginning, there would be a lot of time to correct the deviation in their cultivation, rather than relying on the thunder pomegranate to forcibly correct it in the process of crossing the tribulation like Su Qingxin. This could save a lot of things. While improving their personal cultivation, it was also beneficial to the development of the sect. In order to guard against accidents, Yang Chun even took out dozens of thunder pomegranates and handed them to the head of the palace. Once a disciple needed it, it could be used. At the very least, it could guarantee the life of the disciple who was crossing the tribulation and forming the nascent soul. Yang Chun and Gong Sunling's plan was not hidden from Gao Yu. In this regard, Gao Yu was happy to see it happen. However, Gao Yu must now devote herself to the process of refining her own life source flying sword and could not leave. Otherwise, maybe Gao Yu would go to the territory of the demon sects to join in the fun. During this time, knowing the plans of Yang Chun and Gong Sunling, Wang Yong did not say much, but first spent some time to refine the sailboat magic weapon. It was still in the shape of a ship, but it was no longer a sailboat. Instead, it had become a multi-storied ship. Not only had his appearance changed, but his flying speed had also increased slightly. Before Wang Yong had the Qilin sword, he had a high-speed flying sword. Back then, he had set off from the sect to the 100,000 mountains to rescue Gao Yu with his flying sword. This time, Wang Yong spared no effort to refine the flying sword into the ship, making it twice as fast as the previous sailboat. With Gong Sunling's ability, driving the ship could now keep pace with Yang Chen's shuttle. In order to add more protection, Wang Yong also added some defensive materials during the refining process. He even got Gong Sunling to participate in the refining process, adding several types of maze arrays and defensive array formations, greatly increasing the defensive capabilities. When a ship flew in the air, because of the effect of a certain maser ray, it would also emit a lot of smoke. From a distance, it looked like a thick cloud, and no one would see the ship surrounded by clouds. The defensive formation used the principle of dispersing spirit force attacks. Once an attack was inflicted on a part of the ship, the formation would evenly distribute the attack to almost all of the parts of the ship that were resistant to attacks. This ensured that the ship wouldn't disintegrate from a powerful attack, unless the power of a single attack could destroy all of the parts. Originally, when Taishaman used the sailboat, it was basically the Yuanying stage ancestors who used it, and they only used the high-speed flight function of the sailboat. There was no need to consider the protection at all. Now, Gong Sunling only had the cultivation base of the early Jidan stage, but she had to be more comprehensive in protection. On the side of Chunyang Palace, Yangchun and Gong Sunling were preparing for the trip in full swing, but the Taishamen were in a lot of trouble. The 6 Yuanying stage ancestors who chased after Yangchun, their life source spirit tablets were broken, and it was confirmed that they would die. The death of the 6 Yuanying stage ancestors, even in Taishamen, was a major event, not to mention what the 6 of them were going to do. The high-level officials were clear about it. Now Yangchun returned to Chunyang Palace safely, and the 6 Yuanying stage ancestors of Taishamen were dead, and the insiders could not help but think more. To say that Yangchun killed 6 masters of the Yuanying stage in an instant, the high-level officials of Taishamen did not believe it. How was it possible? It was already a miracle that a guy in the early Jidan stage could kill a Yuanying stage ancestor one-on-one, not to mention 6, plus the C calming flag array. This was simply impossible. However, the instant death of the 6 Yuanying stage ancestors needed an explanation. What also puzzled the high-level officials of Taishamen was that Li Junyu of the Green Jade Immortal Island was also a Yuanying stage master, and she also brought dozens of 10th Water Divine Thunder, but she did not take down and eliminate Yangchun, and even she herself was missing. It seemed that when facing Yangchun, no matter how powerful the enemy was, Yangchun could come back safely. But his enemies were not so lucky. They were either missing or dead. The 6 Yuanying stage ancestors of Taishamen were the same, Li Junyu was the same, and even Luo Yuan in the late Deshang stage was the same, which was very puzzling. This question must be answered. In any case, the Taishamen had determined one thing. That was, Yangchun knew the ancient text on the secret key. This point has been confirmed in the experiment arranged by Li Junyu in the Green Jade Immortal Island. But some keywords did not dare to let Yangchun see, for fear that Yangchun would find something. In other words, before Yangchun gave them the mystery of the key to the riddle, the Taishamen would not do anything to Yangchun for the time being. At least they would not kill Yangchun. Even if they wanted to kill Yangchun to vent their anger, it was also after completing this matter. Yangchun alone brought it. After all, it was still a small trouble, but another thing made the Taishamen have a headache. Recently, no one knew where the rumor began to spread, so that the Taishamen were busy dealing with the explanation. The rumor was very simple. The Taishamen wanted to recruit a large number of monster cultivators and demon sects to enrich the strength of the sect. There was no source, and there was no more modification. However, combined with the current situation of the Taishamen, many people began to believe it. There was no doubt that their strength was greatly damaged. The mountain gate was blown up, and the tens of thousands of reserved disciples of the Taishamen were almost wiped out. Everyone knew this. Recently, the Taishamen had also set up a hall of eccentrics, and they were recruiting monster cultivators. This was also a fact, and there was no way to deny it. Then, wouldn't it be logical for him to recruit demon sect disciples next? It was a very natural inference. Although many people were hindered by the despotic power of the Taishamen, they did not accuse them face to face, but they also spread it out. Especially among the monster cultivators recruited by the Taishamen this time, there were several who had indeed mixed in the territory of the demon sect before, and there were many people there who had a deep relationship. All of this showed that this rumor was not groundless, but it was true. In an instant, the Tao sect leader, the Taishamen, fell into an awkward situation. Chapter 704. The Devil Sect and Taoism had always been irreconcilable. From the cultivation style to the purpose they pursued, they were all different. Therefore, eliminating the devil sect had always been the righteous reason for the Taoism to slaughter the devil sect. Now, in the hands of the Taoism cultivators, except for those rookies who had not left the mountain gate, who did not have a few devil sect lives, a large part of the experience of the Taoism disciples, including the rogue cultivators, was to carry out the great cause of eliminating the devil sect. Of course, as for whether they were the real disciples of the devil sect, it was still debatable, but at least in name, they were all devils. Some rumors were easy to stop, but some were not. It was not so easy for the Taishamen to recruit people from the devil sect. Although this rumor sounded ridiculous, it was simply impossible for the leader of the Tao sect to be in cahoots with the demon sect. However, a few demons who had always been close to the devil sect joined the Taishamen's Hall of Eccentrics. This was a bit unclear. What did these demons want to do by joining the Taishamen? Did they want to collude with the devil sect through them? The great thing about rumors was that there would always be some vague evidence to support it, making people feel that it was the case. If they wanted to refute the rumors, they had to explain the purpose of these demons joining the Taishamen. God knew that when the Taishamen recruited these guys, they only saw that they were strong and could quickly improve the strength of the sect. Anyway, after they made the demon soul oath, they would be loyal and reliable. They did not expect that they had such a complicated relationship. However, they had to refute the rumors. This matter was related to the development of the sect. If they did not let the other Taoism sects clear up the misunderstanding, it might cause a bigger conflict if it continued to develop. However, it was really not so easy to explain clearly. Even if the Taishamen were powerful, some things could not be reassured with words. Especially now that the Taishamen's strength had been greatly damaged, it was difficult for everyone to believe their side of the story. There were motives, actions, suspicions, and a few demons who joined the Taishamen as evidence. It was not so easy to prove their innocence with a few words. Expel those demons to show their sincerity? That was even more impossible. Once they did that, it would temporarily show that the Taishamen did not have much relationship with the demon sect. However, would there still be demons willing to serve them? Once the hearts of the demon clan who had set out to conduct the demon soul experiment were cold, the Taishamen would be lucky not to be seen as enemies by the demon clan, not to mention recruiting demon clan members to fill up the sect. For a time, the foreign affairs elders of the Taishamen sect frequently went out to explain the misunderstanding and clarify the rumors to the big sect. They might not be able to make everyone feel at ease, but they had to make sure that the big sect wouldn't misunderstand them. All in all, it was a huge headache. Even when it came to recruiting new disciples in the sect, it was difficult for him to do so. Even if they managed to recruit new disciples, it would not be easy to train them. In the near future, the Taishamen had no choice but to temporarily postpone their steps in this aspect. While the sect was vigorously rebuilding the sect, they would still mainly recruit people like the Demon Clan who could become a fighting force upon joining. Yang Chun was very happy to watch this kind of excitement leisurely, especially when he knew where the rumors came from. There was no better time than watching the enemy being overwhelmed and unable to do anything. When the Taishamen were in a hurry because of a few rumors, the palace master and the elders were vigorously promoting the plan to establish forces in the secular world. Yang Chen's proposal was valued by everyone, and everyone realized this. From the beginning of the Taishamen's vigorous recruitment of the Demon Clan, it was bound to enter the era of the crazy rise of the Hall of Eccentrics of various sections. Since even the Demon Clan could accept it, then why not put down their pride a little and take the initiative to recruit those cultivation geniuses among human beings? After the decision was made at the top, everything was much simpler. For those slaves, there is almost no need to choose between being a slave in the Chunyang Palace or returning to the secular world. Everyone knew which one to choose, and all of this was very simple. As long as they paid their loyalty to the Chunyang Palace, they could get it. The sect would sponsor these disciples who returned to the secular world with a huge wealth in the eyes of the secular world, so that these slaves could establish their own families as soon as possible. And at the same time, give them a long-term business. Of course, how to maintain it depended on how they operated it. All these slaves who were sent out had an additional task. That was to do everything possible to secretly search for young people with cultivation qualifications in all places, and then report back to the sect. They would only pretend to be in contact with those who were tested by chance, and would never be found to have deliberate behavior. The sect would quickly arrange for official disciples to bring these outstanding children into the mountain gate, according to their reports. Of course, all of this was secret. No one would know except for the core disciples who were responsible for the implementation and the people themselves. During the 8 months that Yang Chun was waiting for Gong Sunling, the sect had arranged at least a dozen loyal slaves. These slaves were also carefully selected. They had outstanding ability and loyalty, and their original families had some small forces. The sudden rise would not cause too much suspicion, and the return was almost immediate. In just 8 months, according to the method provided by Yang Chun, at least a dozen young people with good cultivation qualifications were found, and they had been secretly brought into the mountain. When the mountain gate was opened to accept disciples, they would be able to join the Chunyang Palace. Among the methods provided by Yang Chun to judge the cultivation qualifications, there was a method to judge the acquired qualifications. These made the head of the palace and the elders very puzzled. In this regard, Yang Chen's explanation was that he found something strange and was experimenting. Perhaps after a few decades of experimentation, some things could be fully confirmed. Before that, he would not explain it for the time being. It was a matter of great importance, and it had to be considered in the long run. The head of the palace and the elders were simply obedient to Yang Chun, and what Yang Chun said had appeared when he served as a disciple. He even let several disciples change the original cultivation method and switch to another 5-element cultivation method. This was most prominent in Gao Yu's case. Yang Chun did not say that there must be a reason not to say it, but everyone knew that this must be something great, and they also let Yang Chun test it on these future disciples of the sect. Everything seemed to be on the right track. If the sect continued at this speed, in another 100 years, it was enough to establish a large number of reserve disciples that could be comparable to the first-class sect. Chapter 705. Gong Sunling finally completed the initial tempering of the Mountain River geographical map and received the Mountain River geographical map into her sea of consciousness. She began to nourish the magic weapon that may take up to 100 years or even longer. Wang Yong also completed the refining of the ship and completely handed it over to Gong Sunling. For a long time, Wang Yong would accompany his master Gao Yu to refine the dragon horn flying sword, which was also a stage to consolidate his cultivation base after entering the Deshang stage. After greeting the head of the palace, Yang Chun directly took Gong Sunling on the road to collect the 7th metal true essence. In order to deceive people, Yang Chen's shuttle was still used for the time being, wrapped in the sea-pouring jasper cup. It was not until they rushed out for at least 2 months that the speed was slightly slowed down. There was some tacit understanding between the two. Even on the shuttle, there was enough space. Gong Sunling also made several delicious side dishes for Yang Chun, so that Yang Chun could drink. A warm atmosphere has been spreading in the shuttle, and Yang Chun enjoyed this atmosphere very much. Talking to his senior sister about some things in cultivation, talking about some things in the outside world, and even talking about the detailed process of some battles with some annoying guys, always made Yang Chun have a feeling of deep affection in the plainness. On this trip, Yang Chun only felt unspeakably comfortable. The tacit understanding with Shi Shanshan was different, and the kind of activity with Sun Qingxue was also different. With Gong Sunling, Yang Chun only felt the warmth of a family. To get to the territory of the demon sects, one needed to pass through the territory of the monster race. There was a direct connection between the demon sects and the Dao sections. However, it was far from the destination of Yang Chun, so it was more convenient to borrow the road. Fortunately, Yang Chen's shuttle was fast enough and hidden enough. Generally speaking, it would not alarm any big monster. Even if it was alarmed, because of the recent easing of the relationship between the Dao sects cultivators and the monster race, usually no big monster would investigate. There were only 2 or 3 accidents when they flew over the demon clan's territory. Yang Chun withdrew the sea-pouring jasper cup when he entered the monster race territory. He didn't want many people to know that he could shield his spiritual awareness at any time. The whereabouts of the flying shuttles were very easy to be seen, especially by the demon race. Some of the more talented guys could even find the flying shuttles that Yang Chun and Gong Sunling were on without using their divine senses from dozens of miles away. They were all small accidents. After being discovered by a few demons who were slightly skilled, some of them flew up to intercept them. Yang Chun did not entangle with these guys and directly controlled the shuttle to drill into the ground. Those who could compete with the shuttle in the air must be as slow as a snail underground. Soon, Yang Chun got rid of their entanglement. Gong Sunling could clearly perceive the changes of the geographical map in the mountain river geographical map, even when she was in the process of quenching her life source magic weapon. Where they passed, the terrain within a few hundred miles would be instantly recorded in the mountain river geographical map. In just a few months, a large area had been added. In the mountain river geographical map, there was also a Li Junyu who had lost her mind and was sacrificially refining it for Gong Sunling every day. Now Li Junyu has completely forgotten why she is wandering on the sea. She only knows that she is constantly flying on the vast sea, cultivating, and then continuing to fly. She has almost become an unconscious puppet. With the help of Li Junyu, a master of the Yuanying stage, the time for Gong Sunling to quench the mountain river geographical map was enough to save more than half. The addition of the geographical map of mountains and rivers could shorten the process even more. Gong Sunling soon noticed this and became more and more expectant that Yang Chun could take her to travel to more places. However, as the two began to enter the territory of the demon's sex, the atmosphere became a little tense. In addition to the differences in the starting point of thinking and the way of doing things, the biggest point between the demon's sex and the Tao sex was the difference in the way of cultivation. The Tao sex paid attention to step-by-step progress. After laying a good foundation, they would slowly seek a breakthrough. The overall process was a steady process. In this way of cultivation, because of the solid foundation, it would become more and more stable in a later stage. The probability of breakthrough was also very high, and the influence of the heart demon was relatively small. However, the cultivation method of the demon's sex was completely different. The Tao sex was difficult at first and then easy, but the demon's sex were easy at first and then difficult. From the very beginning, the demon sect had always been opportunistic, using all sorts of methods to improve themselves. However, as they cultivated, their foundations were not solid enough, and their mental state was not strong enough, which led to huge mental demons. Relatively speaking, the cultivation of the demon sex before the Yuanying stage was much faster than that of the Tao sex. Almost 90% of the Tao sex cultivators with the same cultivation years were not the opponents of the demon sex cultivators. There was a lot of difference in the realm, and it was difficult to win. But after the Yuanying stage, the Tao sex had some upper hand. However, this was also relative, and it was only the gap in the realm of cultivation. If they really wanted to fight, the demon sex would act unscrupulously, and it was hard to say who would win or lose. There was a certain truth in the saying that the Tao was a foot higher and the demon was 10 feet higher. To use the simplest words to describe the characteristics of the demon sex cultivators, the following adjectives could be used: insidious, vicious, and able to fight. In the territory of the demon sex, they had to be more careful. Yang Chun came here just to collect the 7th metal true essence, and it had nothing to do with killing the demons and defending the Tao. Gong Sunling just came to improve the geography of the mountains and rivers in the geographical map of mountains and rivers, and did not have this kind of thought. Otherwise, the two little Jidan stage cultivators running to the territory of the demon sex, it was not defending the Tao, it was sending themselves to death. The demon sex also had a vast area, and unlike the Tao sex, the spiritual veins here had begun to be filled with some faint demonic energy. The deeper they went in, the thicker these auras were. As long as ordinary people were contaminated with these auras, they would unknowingly be possessed. If the Tao sex cultivators absorbed too much demonic energy and did not refine it in time, it would also be a disaster. These demonic energy would accumulate, and once it erupted, it would be a great heart demon, and it would take the life of the cultivator unknowingly, which was also a common thing. If they entered the place with the strongest demonic energy in the beginning, it was also possible to explode and die directly. Yang Chun and Gong Sunling were both moving carefully here. In the territory of the demon sects, they could not be careless. Yang Chun was not a brave and ruthless person. If he could not fight, then he would not fight. It was quite a bit of a sneaky feeling. At present, Yang Chun has not met many people from the demon sections. In such a situation, Yang Chun hoped that it would stay the same. If he could collect the seventh metal true essence without anyone knowing, it would be the best thing. It was a pity that things went against one's wishes. The better the hope, the crueler the reality. The two flew in the direction of the seventh metal true essence for a few days and found a lot of people from the demon sects. Chapter 706. At this time, using the shuttle, a magic weapon that was not contaminated with the slightest devil chi, was clearly a provocation. Yang Chun found a place and quickly put away the shuttle. Then he let Gong Sunling find a black veil to cover her face. Then the two continued to hurry like ordinary devil sect cultivators. At the beginning, they occasionally encountered a few devil sect cultivators. Everyone did not talk to each other, but kept a distance and was careful to guard against each other. In the eyes of the devil cultivators, there was little trust. Everyone was respected by strength, and they were always fighting and scheming against each other. Maybe when they were friends who were drinking and chatting happily, in the blink of an eye, they would be fighting. The devil cultivators encountered on the road, if they were not natural enemies, they would come up and fight. If they didn't know each other, they would rarely make friends. It was a habit, not a natural indifference. However, Yang Chun was very aware that the other party seemed to have a very obvious hostility to the two of them. This made Yang Chun puzzled. Even if it was a devil cultivator, they couldn't say that strangers would fight and kill each other when they met. There must be some reasons for this. It's just that Yang Chun didn't figure it out for a while. The other party was careful to keep a distance and did not approach. Walking forward for another 2 days, Yang Chun was even more strange. The few devil cultivators he had encountered before had been on the same road as him. Even the direction had not changed slightly, and they had always kept a similar distance. Between several devil cultivators, it seemed that there was the same relationship, and they were all on guard against each other. The cultivation of these devil cultivators was not very high. The highest one was only in the middle Jiedan stage, and there were 3 in the peak of the foundation stage. Along the way, it seemed that there were more people in this direction, but the atmosphere was getting more and more strange. Yang Chun didn't want to get involved. He thought it was just on the way. He didn't take the initiative to make a move. He just followed the flow of people and walked in the direction of the seventh metal true essence. There were already hundreds of people gathered in this direction, and the situation was already very wrong. At this time, if Yang Chun wanted to catch someone and figure out what was going on, it was bound to alarm these devil cultivators around. There was still Gong Sunling by his side, and Yang Chun didn't want to cause more trouble. He could only hope that when he reached his destination, he would separate from these people and go about his own business. However, even if Yang Chun didn't cause any trouble, others might not be able to tolerate him getting away with it. In a situation where everyone was alone, the team of Yang Chun and Gong Sunling was very conspicuous in the large crowd around them. Yang Chun, there's something wrong with the surrounding atmosphere. Gong Sunling, who was also on guard, suddenly reminded him in a low voice. Of course, Yang Chun also noticed the abnormality in the surroundings. He nodded slightly and didn't say anything more. The two of them had developed quite a bit of tacit understanding. There were many things that they did not need to communicate too much to know what to do. An invisible aura. It was not known from where it began to spread, but Yang Chun found the clue in the first time. Someone is using poison. When a certain breath of air entered Yang Chun's mouth, Yang Chun keenly noticed it. Gong Sunling, who was next to him, was slightly shocked and held her breath quietly. There's no need, A very subtle poisonous gas will make people's strength drop unconsciously. Yang Chun didn't care about this at all. Abai's body, the blue jade vine, just revealed a small tip on her body, and the surrounding poisonous gas was swept away. Of course, Gong Sunling believed in Yang Chen's words. She let go of her courage to breathe and behave like a normal person. Her eyes turned around, trying to find out who was doing it. The calm situation did not last too long. Soon someone discovered that someone was releasing poison and suddenly panicked. Who is sneak attacking? In the blink of an eye, the brief peace that had been barely maintained was broken in an instant. Dozens of magic weapons quickly rose into the air and attacked wildly in the crowd, without distinguishing between enemies and friends. Yang Chun and Gong Sunling had always been at the back of the team. As soon as there was a commotion, Gong Sunling immediately became alert, and a protective formation flag was directly placed beside her, completely protecting the two of them. There were already screams coming from the front. There were a few guys who obviously had low cultivation bases, and they were also hit by the silent poisonous gas. At this moment, they were simply meat on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. The team of 100 people was reduced by half in an instant. Perhaps it was the two masters of the Jidan stage, Yang Chun and Gong Sunling, that made people a little afraid. The first round of magic weapon attacks did not fall on their heads. It seemed that all the people who did it had the same idea, to pick the soft persimmon and pinch it first. The first to die were those with low cultivation bases, demonic cultivators in the foundation stage. Except for one who seemed to have a backer in the Jidan stage, the rest were all killed. There were almost 30 or 40 people left. Almost all of them were Jidan stage cultivators. Everyone controlled their own magic weapons and looked around. It seemed that they were looking for a good opportunity to make a move. Yang Chun and Gong Sunling didn't even know why these people suddenly started to fight. However, since it was time to fight, Yang Chun would not be afraid. As soon as he opened his hand, the blood phantom vine flying sword appeared in his hand. In the territory of the demonic sects, the blood phantom vine flying sword was more suitable to use. The powerful effect of the blood phantom vine to absorb flesh and blood was very in line with the style of some guys in the demonic sections. Yang Chun had already discovered that there was an ambush in front of him, but he had not attacked, just waiting for the other party to appear. Now it seemed that those guys had the intention to kill them all. Jiji. Suddenly, a burst of extremely unpleasant laughter came from the front, causing everyone's heart to tremble. Yang Chun and Gong Sunling were fine, but there were already a few guys in the Jidan stage around them who began to tremble with the laughter. The sound was getting louder and louder, and more people seemed to be trembling. Finally, someone realized that something was wrong and screamed, "What kind of poison is this? Poisonous? When did I get poisoned?" A series of panicked voices sounded, and at least half of the remaining people became headless flies, scurrying around. Whoosh! 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 3 shadows jumped out from the darkness in front of them and rushed toward the crowd. As soon as the 3 black shadows rushed close, everyone saw the appearance of the black shadows, but they were 3 unknown monsters. At the moment, this monster seemed to be someone else's pet. It rushed to the side of the crowd, but did not go forward. It just took a corpse in its mouth and pulled it aside. In front of everyone's eyes, it began to gnaw madly. The sound of teeth gnawing brought a strange oppression to everyone present. After every few bites, the 3 monsters would raise their heads, look at the crowd, and then continue to lower their heads to gnaw. They did not put the people present in their eyes at all. It could be described as if there was no one else present. Chapter 707. Gong Sunling looked at this scene, and her face suddenly turned a little pale. Although she was already a supreme master of the Jidan stage, although she had killed demons when she was training, she had never seen such a scene of cannibalism in front of her. The monsters swallowed the corpses as if nothing had happened, but Yang Chun soon discovered that something was wrong. After those monsters swallowed the corpses, their eyes began to turn slightly red, which was obviously not a good thing. Sure enough, after swallowing a corpse, those monsters were not enough. They continued to rush into the corpses, each pulled out a corpse and continued to gnaw on it. Among the people present, In addition to Yang Chun and Gong Sunling, there were a few Jiadan stage masters who were not poisoned. Those who were poisoned were still trembling with the sinister laughter. They didn't know what kind of poison it was, but it would make a group of Jiadan stage masters have no resistance. This time, after those monsters swallowed the corpses, their bodies began to grow rapidly, and they were twice their original size. At first, they were already the size of a normal cow, but this change almost directly turned into 3 small meat mountains. Their eyes had turned red, like 2 small red lanterns. After swallowing 2 corpses each, the 3 monsters separated in 3 directions and slowly pressed towards the crowd. When a sinister laughter suddenly sounded, the 3 monsters seemed to have received some kind of signal and rushed towards their respective targets. The most shocking thing was that the Jiadan stage demonic cultivators, who had just trembled with the laughter at this moment, as if they had been trained, they attacked the people around them. They were mixed in the crowd, and everyone was not far from each other. At first, everyone thought that these people were taken advantage of by the poisonous gas. Now that their strength had been greatly damaged, no one was too careful. This sudden attack surprised everyone. As soon as they found that something was wrong, they immediately counterattacked. Although their attention was attracted by the monsters, those demonic cultivators did not completely lose their vigilance after all. Although they were surprised, their counterattack was unusually sharp, and they would not return without seeing blood. Chi chi chi, the sound of the flying sword penetrating the body came one after another, and it sounded in an instant. After all, the poisoned fellows were still in a poisoned state. Their bodies seemed to be very slow in reacting to the attacks of the flying sword, allowing the demonic cultivators to land hit on them. However, the 3 monstrous beasts were exceptionally fierce. Although they were also hit by the flying sword, it seemed that after the monstrous beasts had devoured the corpses, their defensive power had greatly increased. Thus, only a few wounds were left on their bodies, but there were no fatal injuries. However, the sharp claws of the 3 monstrous beasts were extremely frightening. After clashing with the flying sword for a few times, they were actually unscathed. Just when everyone thought that there was no need to worry about the poisoned fellows, and that they only had to deal with the 3 monstrous beasts, an accident happened again. The flying sword had pierced through their bodies, and everyone thought they were dead. However, they actually pounced on the crowd at an abnormally fast speed. It was impossible to tell that they had suffered fatal injuries. Boom, boom, boom. A group of people pounced forward. They weren't fighting with anyone at all. Instead, they were directly self-detonating. The self-detonation of a gold core master, even a master of the same cultivation level, would be flustered to deal with it. What's more, there was not only 1 gold core master who self-detonated, but at least 3 or 5. In an instant, more than half of the surviving dozen or so people were killed by the explosion of the golden cores. There were only 5 who could stand. Among the 5, of course, Yang Chun and Gong Sunling were included. Not to mention that Gong Sunling's protective array was very comprehensive. Even without this array, Yang Chun could not be hurt by this explosion. From the beginning to the present, Yang Chun and Gong Sunling did not make a move. They just stood in place and put on a defensive posture. However, just because they did not make a move did not mean that those people would not target them. Beside the 2 of them, there were at least 5 gold core masters who self-detonated. The violent explosion even caused Gong Sunling's protective array to shake a little. However, the spiritual power of Gong Sunling's array was provided by the best spirit stone given by Yang Chun. Although the explosion of the other party was violent, it only made the protection of the array fall rapidly. It had not reached the bottom because the powerful spiritual power was replenished. It was safe and sound. So far, the main character has not yet appeared. Yang Chun knew that the other party was hiding in the darkness not far ahead, watching all this coldly. All the attacks were inexplicable, and everyone seemed to be a bit weird. Yang Chun was waiting for the other party to appear on their own initiative. In addition to Yang Chun, there were 3 gold core masters who were alive, but they were also entangled by 3 monsters. Because of the self-detonation of the surrounding gold cores, they also had different degrees of injuries. What surprised Yang Chun and Gong Sunling was that the three of them were clearly at a disadvantage, but none of them escaped. Yang Chun looked more carefully. It seemed that they also wanted to escape, but for some reason, they couldn't escape. Gong Sunling certainly saw the abnormality and was about to remind Yang Chun, but was stopped by Yang Chun slightly. Yang Chun's eyes just stared at the three monsters and the three gold core masters who were fighting without blinking. This battle did not last too long. The three monsters were very fierce to Yang Chun and Gong Sunling, who were watching on the side, and showed their powerful combat power. The monster's own defense was very strong, and the ordinary flying sword could only stab a hole. Only the flying sword of a gold core master caused serious damage to the monsters. Under the huge wound, there was a piece of black flesh and blood. Obviously, this gold core master's flying sword was also smeared with poison. In the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the outcome of this battle was decided. The three gold core masters died without exception, and one of the monsters was finally beheaded. The remaining two were all bloody wounds. The two monsters began to slowly approach Yang Chun and Gong Sunling. They stopped when they were not very close, and then each dragged a corpse and started to eat again. After eating less than half, the injuries on their bodies were all healed. Their eyes were even more red, and their bodies seemed to be bigger. If there is nothing else, we will go first. Yang Chun just looked at the two monsters as if nothing had happened, and he didn't care. Only after they had fully recovered did they open their mouths to shout, "Want to go?" At this time, isn't a little too late? A gloomy voice came from the darkness, and it was the guy who laughed just now. With the guy's voice, the two monsters who had obviously recovered and were even more powerful had taken a few steps forward with a low roar and put on an attack posture. It's not a matter of time. If you want to go, then go. Yang Chun just responded faintly. Relying on these two beasts, they can't keep us. Chapter 708. Just because of a protective array that you don't even dare to come out? The gloomy voice was full of disdain. It seemed that he despised Yang Chun and Gong Sunling's method of hiding in the array. Only cowards hide in a turtle shell and be complacent. As you wish. Yang Chun took 2 steps forward and directly stepped out of the range of the array. The enemy hiding in the dark suddenly rejoiced. If Yang Chun and Gong Sunling stayed in the array, he really couldn't think of a way. Even the power of the explosion of 5 gold core cultivators couldn't hurt the array. It must be a strong enough protection. His words just now were vaguely provoking the two of them so that they wouldn't rely on the strength of the array. Because of that incident, there would be more demonic cultivators appearing. Yang Chun and Gong Sunling had been in the array. The guy in the dark probably couldn't do anything and could only retreat. Now Yang Chun really couldn't stand the provocation and walked out of the array, which was exactly what the person in the dark wanted. Even if Yang Chun came out alone, it would be worth it if he could weaken the strength of the two people by half. Since you are willing to die, I will fulfill your wish. The person in the dark snorted coldly. Without any instructions, the two beasts, who were originally staring at him, instantly turned into 2 black lights and flew straight to Yang Chun. 2 beasts, 2 directions. No matter which side Yang Chun wanted to block, he had to worry about the other side. Moreover, the person in the dark was very relieved with the power of the beasts. After swallowing 2 corpses of the foundation stage and 1 gold core cultivator, the power of the beasts had skyrocketed to the peak of gold core. If it wasn't for the fact that their power had reached the peak temporarily, and this temporary power couldn't be increased anymore, the owner of the beasts would definitely control them to swallow a few more gold core cultivators' corpses. There seemed to be no shortage of gold core cultivators' corpses here. Although Yang Chun looked strong, he was only at the early stage of gold core. Relying on Gong Sunling's array, he could withstand the power of the explosion of 5 gold core cultivators. At the very least, that was what the owner of the Yao beast believed. Be it the Dao sex or the demon sex, the strength of a cultivator did not depend on how strong their bodies were. Because of this, in the eyes of the demonic beast master, if Yang Chun were to step forward because of what he said, it was purely a rookie courting death. Judging from this, a guy who couldn't even take a few words of provocation was probably a hothead. Gong Sunling, who was with Yang Chun, naturally didn't have to worry about anything. The moment the two monstrous beasts pounced, the owner of the monstrous beast could even see the scene of Yang Chun being torn to pieces by his two pets. One of the three treasures had died, but he had killed more than 100 people. His other demonic art had also directly risen to a level. He would be more confident in this operation. When he thought of the benefits if he could get that kind of thing, even if the owner of the monstrous beast was hidden in the darkness, he couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth and reveal a smile. The two monstrous beasts rushed up from the left and right. Yang Chun held the blood phantom vine sword in his right hand and stabbed forward very casually, easily piercing into the bloody mouth of the monstrous beasts. His left hand was not idle either. He stretched out his big hand and grabbed the claws of the monstrous beasts that rushed up. Originally, these two actions did not seem to pose any threat to the two monstrous beasts. It could even be said that Yang Chun was courting death. The claws of the monstrous beast had already been shown in the previous battle. Even if it was the flying sword of the gold-core demonic cultivator, it would be safe and sound. Yang Chun actually used his bare hands to grab it. Wasn't he courting death? As for the sword piercing into the mouth of the monstrous beasts, it was even more insignificant. The resilience of the monstrous beasts was strong, and their defense was also extremely excellent. Even if the rare protection in their mouth was not as strong as the outer skin protection, it was not to say that a small stab from the flying sword could do that. Seeing Yang Chun's response, the monstrous beast's owner had confirmed that Yang Chun was a rookie who had been protected by the elders until now. He didn't even know what his own pet was, and so many people had died before, and he didn't know how to learn a lesson. He deserved to die. Involuntarily, the monstrous beast's owner raised the corner of his mouth again, revealing a smirk. But this time, this smirk didn't even last until the corners of his mouth were raised to the highest, and it directly turned into shock. His left hand grabbed one of the claws of the monstrous beasts, and Yang Chun's hand did not stop. His left arm exerted force, and he directly swung his arm in a big circle. The monstrous beasts that were caught by the claws were involuntarily drawn in a big circle in the air by Yang Chun's hand, and then it was slammed heavily on the ground. The process may be very simple, but a monstrous beast the size of several cows, with the power of a mad rush, was caught by someone with one hand in the air and smashed to the ground. The atmosphere was really shocking to the extreme. Boom! The huge body naturally had a huge weight, and the monstrous beast body was smashed to the ground, directly smashing a big pit in the ground. In the bang, accompanied by a cracking sound, it was not known how many bones of the monstrous beast were broken. However, with the momentum of the monstrous beasts on the ground with one hand, Yang Chun's right-hand side of the monstrous beasts, the blood phantom vine-flying sword just pointed the tip into the mouth of the monstrous beasts. According to reason, nothing should happen. Even if the tip of the flying sword was sharp, it was just a small hole in the monstrous beasts. The problem was that the monstrous beasts that were stabbed stopped in an instant. The gigantic body that was charging forward suddenly came to a halt. This strange situation made it hard for anyone to remain calm. But this was not the most terrible thing. The most terrible thing was that the monstrous beasts that were quiet, in an instant, the whole body, skin, and flesh suddenly shrank inward. In less than a moment, the monstrous beasts were emaciated and turned into a skinny appearance. Pulling out the blood phantom vine sword, Yang Chun looked down at the huge monstrous beast's head that was thrown in front of him, shook his head slightly, and stabbed down with the sword. In the blink of an eye, the two monstrous beasts became two piles of bones, and there was no sign of life. Yang Chun lightly pulled out the blood phantom vine sword, took a sword flower, put it behind him, and sneered in the direction of the monstrous beast's owner hiding in the darkness. Devour flesh and blood. Their cultivation is still shallow. Yang Chun's words instantly ignited the anger of the monstrous beast's owner. The two pets were killed by Yang Chun with two swords, and the monstrous beast's owner's anger had begun to burn, and the latter's sentence completely burned his anger to the extreme. Although Yang Chun's means of killing the monstrous beasts were shocking, the monstrous beasts were only one of his means, and it was not a trump card. Yang Chun dared to provoke him like this. Today, he must kill Yang Chen anyway. Chapter 709. Pong! A black smoke suddenly shrouded Yang Chen. The bones of the two monsters next to him, at the moment of contact with the smoke, issued a hissing sound that made people's teeth sour, emitted black smoke, and began to quickly melt. The poisonous black smoke even enveloped Gong Sunling and the protective formation. The other party was planning to catch Yang Chun and Gong Sunling in one fell swoop. However, this poisonous black smoke was an excellent tonic for a Bai's body in the medicine garden, the blue jade vine. The blue jade vine, which could detoxify almost all poisons, directly came out of the medicine garden. The soft vines quickly enveloped this large piece of black smoke and then began to absorb it quickly. The owner of the monster, who was hidden in the dark, saw a large piece of green vines suddenly spraying out of the poisonous smoke he released. Although he did not recognize the blue jade vine at a glance, he also knew that this was definitely something that could detoxify. However, if Yang Chun thought that his means were only poisonous smoke, then he was wrong. The corner of the monster's owner's mouth cracked again, and a silent sneer appeared on his face. Boom! Yang Chen's sea of consciousness shook several times, so that Yang Chun, who was concerned about whether Gong Sunling was attacked by the poisonous smoke, was startled. Did the other party still have the means to attack with spiritual awareness? In the black smoke, there seemed to be invisible monsters hidden, but even Yang Chen's spiritual awareness did not find any clues. As he was wondering, his sea of consciousness shook again, and Yang Chun suddenly understood. Soul-devouring technique, this was probably the other party's trump card. No wonder the previous few Jidan stage masters clearly knew that they would not be able to escape. At that time, Yang Chun saw some abnormalities, and now he finally understood the other party's means. Those few people were clearly hit by the soul-devouring technique when they were attacked by the monster and the Jidan stage, so they had such a reaction. As for those Jidan stage masters who self-exploded, they should have been hit by the soul-devouring technique after being poisoned, and they couldn't help it. Looking at the means of the other party, to be able to control dozens of Jidan experts at the same time, the cultivation of the soul-devouring technique was really not low. However, in the face of Yang Chen's sea of consciousness, no matter how high one's level was, they would not be able to enter. Yang Chen's knowledge sea had already been condensed to an unimaginable degree. Even if the other party controlled several soul-devouring primers, they would not be able to open a single crack in Yang Chen's knowledge sea. After 3 consecutive attacks, the other party seemed to have some fear. Yang Chen's heart moved, and he suddenly took the initiative to open up his sea of consciousness, waiting for the next soul-devouring technique. As expected, the 4th attack seemed to have concentrated the other party's full strength. Boom! More than 10 illusory shadows directly rushed into Yang Chen's sea of consciousness. The shadows that rushed into the sea of consciousness quickly revealed their original forms. There were more than a dozen people that looked exactly the same. However, in the sea of consciousness, everything was a simulation of divine sense and not real people. But this already meant that at least a dozen soul-devouring primers had entered Yang Chen's knowledge sea. Next, these soul-devouring primers began to wreak havoc. The biggest feature of the soul-devouring technique was that after the soul-devouring primers rushed into the other party's knowledge sea, they would devour the other party's soul. After wantonly destruction, they would use the primers to strengthen themselves to achieve the purpose of controlling the person. This guy's soul-devouring technique was quite powerful. There were more than a dozen soul-devouring primers, and each action was different. They were completely fighting for themselves, but they were not chaotic. It was unknown how many people he had used this trick. Unfortunately, now he had encountered Yang Chun. The knowledge sea was extremely condensed. The little people condensed by more than a dozen soul-devouring primers could not cause any damage to Yang Chen's knowledge sea. Yang Chen looked at the dozens of soul-devouring primers in his sea of consciousness, and a smile appeared on his face. If the other party noticed that something was wrong at the beginning and fled immediately, Yang Chen might have to spend more effort to catch up. But now, since the other party's soul-devouring primers had entered his knowledge sea, then life or death was no longer in the hands of the enemy. After the soul-devouring technique was successfully cast, the growing soul-devouring primer could control the opponent's body. At the same time, every time it succeeded, it could also strengthen the soul-devouring primer. But this time, it was clear that he had hit an iron plate. When more than a dozen soul-devouring primers rushed into Yang Chen's knowledge sea without any hindrance, the owner of the monster beast thought that he had succeeded. But when he found that the soul-devouring primers could not shake the other party's knowledge sea, he noticed that something was wrong. Unfortunately, it was too late to discover it now. The soul-devouring technique could control the opponent, which meant that it was connected to his own knowledge sea. Once he could not control the other party, it meant that he would suffer the backlash of the soul-devouring technique. Yang Chen just easily used the blood demon vine in his knowledge sea, and it easily strangled the vast majority of the soul-devouring primers. Even in the knowledge sea, the blood demon vine seemed to retain the powerful characteristics of devouring flesh and blood, but it devoured the soul-devouring primers sent by the enemy. After swallowing more than a dozen in a row, the blood demon vine seemed to have been nourished and became more and more robust. Even the second wood spirit power in Yang Chen's body was a little smoother. What was left for the other party was only a soul-devouring primer, but it was also swallowed by the blood demon vine, and it was half dead. Leaving the soul-devouring primer was to keep the other party's life and to know something about what happened here from his mouth. After coming to the demon's sect site, Yang Chen had not communicated with any demonic cultivator, and some of the situations here were not very clear. Just like in the past few days, the demonic cultivators were constantly gathering in this direction. Yang Chen did not know why. This guy came to his door. It was just the most suitable person to ask. His spiritual awareness had already locked the location of this guy's body in reality, and Yang Chen easily pulled out the other party without any twists and turns. Originally relying on powerful pets and poisons, coupled with the soul-devouring technique, this guy was almost invincible when he met the enemy, but this time he was pulled out by Yang Chen like a dead dog. More than a dozen soul-devouring primers were swallowed, and he was no longer able to escape. He didn't even have the strength to stand up. When Yang Chen picked him up, he was as soft as a puddle of mud. "Don't kill me. Please don't kill me." Even though his body was so weak that he couldn't move, he didn't forget to beg for mercy. He almost cried with tears and snot, which was completely different from the spirit he had when he was hiding in the dark and plotting against hundreds of people. How can he be so unprincipled? Gong Sunling was very contemptuous of this and despised it. On the demon's sect side, if he can survive, he will do anything. Yang Chen has seen a lot of demonic cultivators' faces, explained with a smile, and then turned his face to the guy on the ground. "I really want to know what happened recently. Why are there so many people gathering in this direction?" Yang Chen's smile was tantamount to the devil in the eyes of the other party. "Also, what is the reason for your attack? Can you tell me?" Chapter 710. The last soul-devouring guide was in the hands of Yang Chen. If he didn't want to die, he could only tell Yang Chen everything he knew. This guy obviously didn't want to die yet. When he heard Yang Chen's question, even though his body was limp and unable to move, he still quickly said what Yang Chen wanted to know. After listening to his words, Yang Chen and Gong Sunling couldn't help but look at each other. The direction of Yang Chen's goal, or to be precise, it should be the destination that Yang Chen wanted to go to. It was a huge mining area. In the past few months, there had been rays of light shooting out from the ground. Recently, the rays of light had become more and more intense, and it carried a strong aura of golden hepta. Some knowledgeable demonic cultivators thought that this was a sign that a demonic weapon was about to be unearthed. Moreover, there was no doubt that this demonic weapon was of the golden hepta attribute. Although no one knew what this demonic weapon was, judging from the aura that had been revealed, it was definitely a powerful magic weapon. After calculating, the demonic cultivator masters felt that the time when the demonic weapon would be unearthed would be in the next 1 or 2 months. There were already countless masters gathered in that area, waiting for the demonic weapon to be unearthed to determine the ownership of the demonic weapon. In order to compete for the magic weapon, everyone fought wantonly. The The scene of blood flowing like a river was not only on the side of the demonic sects, but also on the side of the Tao sections. This time, it seemed that an expert had spoken that no one was allowed to kill each other in the mining area. Everything was up to fate. If anyone disobeyed, they would be killed. The people that Yang Chen met on the way were naturally some guys who heard the news and wanted to take advantage of it. Because everyone had the same idea, they were almost hostile to each other along the way and were cautious. But because of the news that an expert had released, no one dared to make a move. If they made a move, they would anger the expert who spoke. Secondly, once they provoked some powerful guys, they would not only fail to take advantage of them, but also get into trouble. And this guy in front of them was taking this opportunity to use poisons and the soul-devouring technique to ambush and attack some of the periphery. Some time ago, he had succeeded twice. This was the third time. Unfortunately, he was unlucky. This time, he met Yang Chun and Gong Sunling. If Yang Chun and Gong Sunling had not appeared, he would have gained a lot from this trip. With so many people's wealth, coupled with the improvement of his soul-devouring and the improvement of his pet's abilities, the benefits were self-evident. If he had known that Yang Chun was so strong, he would not have made a move. As long as he escaped immediately after he succeeded, Yang Chun might not have bothered with him. Unfortunately, there were no ifs in this world. Yang Chun and Gong Sunling didn't expect such a thing to happen. It was a very normal thing for a demonic artifact to be unearthed. In a Tao sect, there would often be some magic treasures that had absorbed enough spiritual energy to break out of the ground and fly out. It was not surprising that they were obtained by others. The problem was that this happened when Yang Chun was planning to collect the 7th metal true essence, and the location was the mining area where Yang Chun was going. What was more coincidental was that the demonic artifact actually had a strong 7th metal aura. It was hard to say whether it was related to the 7th metal true essence left by Tai Bai Jinxing Li Chongding. From this guy's mouth, Yang Chen knew that there had been a lot of demonic experts gathered in the mining area. If he and Gong Sunling went there, the Tao sect cultivation method that the two people practiced might be seen through and bring unnecessary danger. Yang Chen was not afraid, but now that Gong Sunling was around, Yang Chun would not let his senior sister suffer any harm. Yang Chun couldn't help but hesitate. Should he temporarily avoid this time, wait for the demonic artifact to be unearthed, and then slowly return, or should he face the difficulties and participate in the grand event of the demonic artifact being unearthed? If he could determine that this demonic artifact had nothing to do with the 7th metal true essence, Yang Chun would not have any hesitation and would definitely choose to avoid it first. Yang Chun himself was very strong, but he was not arrogant enough to be invincible in the world, to be able to flatten the demonic sects by himself. But now he did not know if this demonic artifact was related to the 7th metal true essence. On the one hand, Yang Chun was not willing to give up the 7th metal true essence. On the other hand, he was worried about the safety of Gong Sunling. He had the intention to put Gong Sunling in the space of a medicine garden, but this kind of protection had lost the original intention of gaining experience, which made Yang Chen embarrassed. Why don't we go and take a look? Yang Chen's hesitation was naturally seen by Gong Sunling. She was also a very smart person. She naturally understood Yang Chen's hesitation and took the initiative to say, "There will be danger." Yang Chen responded, "There are masters over there, and they won't let us kill each other. Let's go and see. There shouldn't be any danger." Gong Sunling smiled, but she also had a plan to open her eyes. "You and I don't have any demonic energy on us. Once we are exposed, it will be very dangerous." Yang Chun still had some concerns, but looking at Gong Sunling's look of expectation, he couldn't bear to break her hopes. He could only comply. "You can go, but everything has to listen to my arrangements." Gong Sunling had gone out several times to gain experience, but this was the first time she really came to the domain of the demonic sects, and she was very excited. When Yang Chun said this, Gong Sunling naturally nodded and agreed. The cultivation method of the two did not have the slightest demonic energy. This was very easy for Yang Chun to solve. There were also many people in the demonic sects who would cultivate some seemingly dignified cultivation methods, but they were very insidious and cunning. Yang Chun could disguise himself as these people at any time, and the blood phantom vine flying sword in his hand was enough to disguise himself as a demonic cultivator who looked majestic but was ruthless. How many Taoist disciples had Dharma treasures that devoured flesh and blood? Except for the disciples of the demonic sects, he couldn't think of any Tao disciples who would have such a vicious flying sword. It was hard to say for Gong Sunling, but it was not that there was no solution. Yang Chen thought about it and gave two methods directly. One was to let Gong Sunling disguise herself as Yang Chen's puppet and refine the Tao disciples into her own puppet, which could better explain Yang Chen's demonic cultivator identity. The other method, which was a little difficult, was to let Gong Sunling disguise herself as Yang Chen's concubine. The demonic sects were much more open to dual cultivation than the Tao sects, and even many demonic cultivators just used the guise of dual cultivation to satisfy their lustful hearts. As long as Gong Sunling appeared to be obedient to Yang Chun, she could easily get through it. What surprised Yang Chun was that after hearing these two methods, Gong Sunling only hesitated a little and chose the second one. Although she was blushing and extremely shy, Gong Sunling would rather appear in front of outsiders as Yang Chen's concubine. Even after Yang Chun proposed this method, Gong Sunling's heart couldn't help but jump a few times, and she seemed to be very happy with this identity. Chapter 711. If his senior sister agrees, Yang Chun certainly has no problem. However, the necessary preparations will not be forgotten. In front of the pile of corpses and the guy who plotted against himself, Yang Chun will certainly not let go. Since he didn't want people to know that there had been a murder here, Yang Chun simply destroyed the body for the guy. All the corpses were thrown to the roots of the blood demon vine. The flesh and blood were swallowed by the blood demon vine, and the bones left became flower fertilizer. The guy who did it, Yang Chun, did not stay. After asking a lot of things, he also became the food of the blood demon vine. There was no need for Yang Chun to hide the traces of the battle at the scene for that guy. Anyway, if someone saw it, they would only trace the guy, and there would be nothing to do with Yang Chun. Gong Sunling, on the other hand, let Yang Chun dress up. As a concubine of a demonic cultivator, she naturally couldn't dress like this. Yang Chun could only take out the set of enchanting clothes prepared for Wan Qian and her apprentices. At the sight of these clothes, Gong Sunling blushed again. Although she and Yang Chun have hugged each other and practiced the highest mystery Yin-Yang Heart Sutra many times, she was always dressed tightly. This kind of clothes that almost exposed most of her body could only be called cloth. How could she, a virgin, wear it? Don't say to wear it. Just looking at it made her blush. However, Gong Sunling had a different impulse. It seemed that if Yang Chun was willing, she would be happy to wear such clothes for Yang Chun to see. However, that was limited to Yang Chun alone. If she really wanted to wear it for many people, Gong Sunling would not be happy. This is worn inside. Of course, Yang Chun knew what Gong Sunling was jealous of, and hurriedly explained, "The outside still needs to be wrapped tightly, but these are the style of dressing here, and can't reveal any flaws." These words made Gong Sunling blush again. Fortunately, after knowing that this was just the clothes worn inside, she felt much better. In fact, not to mention that Gong Sunling was unwilling. If it was just wearing those cloth strips, Yang Chun himself would not agree. How could he agree to let other men see his senior sister's body? If she wanted to pretend to be Yang Chen's concubine in the land full of demonic cultivators, she had to follow the customs of the demonic sections. Many demonic cultivators collect beautiful women for fun, and it was very normal for Yang Chun to bring a beautiful concubine with him. Of course, she had to wear clothes outside, but it was a slightly transparent gauze. With this gauze, most of the body would be covered. But Yang Chun was still not willing to let people take advantage of him. He put a big cloak on Gong Sunling and wrapped her exquisite body in it. Then he gave up. In this way, Gong Sunling was wrapped in a cloak and her face was covered with a black gauze. Although it was a bit incongruous, it was already very much like the style here. But pretending to be Yang Chen's concubine, there were still some things to do. At the very least, Gong Sunling must maintain that kind of intimacy with Yang Chun. This was not the feeling of hugging each other when Gong Sunling and Yang Chun were just spiritual awareness double cultivation, but a feeling that she was already Yang Chen's woman, completely open physically and mentally, allowing Yang Chun to be intimate with her. Between the two, they must show that there was no estrangement and a feeling of sweetness. This was very difficult for Gong Sunling. On the road, the two must quickly establish this tacit understanding, so that both of them were accustomed to that kind of intimacy. What surprised Yang Chun was that Gong Sunling quickly mastered that kind of feeling. Whether it was relying on Yang Chun to act coquettishly or giving Yang Chun a piece of delicious food with her slender jade hand, she showed the kind of extreme attachment to Yang Chun. This was another kind of feeling that made Yang Chen's heart beat, as if between the two, they had really become a husband and wife. And Gong Sunling seemed to be more happy. After a few deliberate actions along the way, the subsequent actions were already natural, and there was no trace of pretense. It seemed that Gong Sunling was not only excellent in cultivation, but also a genius in this. When Yang Chun sighed at Gong Sunling's excellent perception, he did not know that Gong Sunling's heart was full of joy. In the heart of Gong Sunling, since she, in Yang Chen's spiritual awareness double cultivation, she had already regarded herself as Yang Chen's woman. In fact, earlier, when Gao Yu persuaded Gong Sunling to help Yang Chen's spiritual awareness double cultivation, Gao Yu gave Gong Sunling such a title. Gong Sunling knew that whether it was Gao Yu, Shi Shanshan, or Sun Qingxue, they were all entangled with Yang Chun. Yang Chun had not made a solemn commitment to anyone until now, except for Gao Yu. However, now she had the opportunity to become Yang Chen's concubine in front of many people. Even Gao Yu did not seem to have such happiness. When Gong Sunling was immersed in this kind of happiness, naturally there was no feeling of hypocrisy. With that kind of emotional investment, no one could see the flaws. Because of Gong Sunling's investment, Yang Chun seemed to have opened up a lot. Along the way, from the beginning of mutual acting to the later natural intimacy, it did not take too much time for the two people. After a period of time, Yang Chen's hand had been holding Gong Sunling's slender waist, and he took her slowly to fly on the sword. Gong Sunling leaned on Yang Chen's body with a face full of happiness. It seemed that she enjoyed such a feeling. Yang Chun couldn't help but be moved as senior sister's wonderful delicate body has been leaning on his body. Even an Iron Man would have a feeling. Along the way, with the warm and fragrant soft jade on the side, almost obedient accommodation, Yang Chun could hardly control himself. Fortunately, Yang Chen's spiritual awareness was strong enough, and he could keep enough sober at any time. He knew that now was not the time to be really affectionate. But in the face of his devoted senior sister, Yang Chun finally sighed secretly in his heart, and with the force of his hands, he took Gong Sunling's waist to fly and changed her to hold her in his arms. "Senior sister, give me some time. After I go back, I will report to Master and marry you." In the ear of Gong Sunling, Yang Chun said this sentence without hesitation. "I know I am greedy. If senior sister is not willing, just forget what I said." Fool! Sitting on the blood phantom vine flying sword, Gong Sunling was like a well-behaved kitten shrinking in the arms of Yang Chun, with a happy expression on her face. Her eyes were closed, but her hands were tightly around Yang Chen's neck, and she didn't want to let go at all. During the flight, Yang Chun held Gong Sunling in his hands, and from time to time approached Gong Sunling's delicate face and whispered something, causing Gong Sunling to often burst into laughter, and even her delicate body would twist in Yang Chen's arms for a long time. In the eyes of outsiders, it was an intimate appearance. Chapter 712. After telling Gong Sunling about Wan Qian's several female apprentices, Gong Sunling did not have a good impression of Wan Qian's master and apprentice for a while. Therefore, Yang Chun directly summoned 5 made puppets of the peak Jian stage, which became a logical thing. Because it was related to the head of the palace and Wan Qian, the elder of the Blue Cloud sect, Yang Chun only told Gong Sunling that Wan Qian's apprentice was Wan Qian. As for Wan Qian, he did not mention it. After the appearance of the 5 revealing and charming maids, Yang Chun and Gong Sunling's extravagance suddenly became very different. Gong Sunling's exquisite ship became a flying tool for the two, and Yang Chun sat on the spacious deck with Gong Sunling in his arms, surrounded by 5 female slaves, dressed in hazy gauze, with an incomparably charming expression on their faces, waiting on the left and right. From time to time, a female slave would pick up the wine or the peeled profound yang fruit and put it into Yang Chen's mouth, a scene of extravagant enjoyment. What surprised Yang Chen the most was Gong Sunling. She was even more into the role than Yang Chen. From time to time, she would hug Yang Chen and twist to ask for a kiss, or she would put the wine in her mouth into Yang Chen's mouth, making Yang Chen a burst of confusion. Accompanied by a stunning, fragrant extravagance, the exquisite ship flew all the way and soon approached Yang Chen's destination, the huge mining area. The 9 secluded iron mining area of the Demon Realm was also very famous. It was not a barren area, but many people were mining or here, and it had already formed a small town. Because of the unearthing of the demonic weapon this time, more demonic cultivators came. But the place where the 7th metal aura leaked was not in this small town, but in a place hundreds of miles away from the north. The 9 secluded iron mining area was very huge. According to the detection of some masters, various metal mines occupied almost tens of thousands of miles underground. It was also because of this that Yang Chun was able to confirm that there were conditions for the formation of 7th metal true essence here, and it was not Tai Bai Jinxing shaking himself. A variety of metal mines belonged to the 7th metal category, and the huge distribution area, just like the 10,000 trees forest, had the conditions to produce the 7th metal true essence. As long as there was a delicate collection formation, it could easily gather the 7th metal true essence naturally formed by these metal mines to a certain point. This was the same as what the Taishaman had done in the Barren Sand Valley. However, the area of the Barren Sand Valley could not be compared with that of the 10,000 trees forest and this 10,000-mile mineral vein. Moreover, the Taishaman had only been operating for a short period of time, so it was not enough for them to gather a large amount of earth element energy. Yang Chen's target wasn't the magic artifact, at least not directly. Hence, he brought Gong Sunling along and headed straight for the small city. There were more demonic cultivators on the road, but this was already close to the small city and the place where the demonic artifact was unearthed. Even if everyone was hostile to each other, no one dared to act rashly. In particular, Yang Chun now put on a posture of playing with a beautiful woman, which was very arrogant. On the contrary, it made some people more cautious and did not dare to make any moves, for fear of provoking the forces behind Yang Chun. A young man in the early Jiedan stage could even play with a beautiful woman in the early Jiedan stage, and at the same time had 5 female slaves in the peak Jiedan stage. This was by no means something that Yang Chun could do. Although the demonic cultivators did not abstain from women, they did not dare to touch any kind of woman, especially if the cultivation base was the same. Once the control was not good, maybe they would be countered by the beautiful woman, and the gains would not make up for the losses. And Yang Chun dared to be so bold and intimate with Gong Sunling in public, and Gong Sunling was still obedient to him. It was obvious that she had been conquered. The 5 female slaves in the peak Jiedan stage perfectly illustrated this point. No one would be stupid enough to provoke Yang Chun, who was unknown and was likely to have a great background. The maids with the same cultivation base, and even higher strength than Yang Chun, were so respectful. People in the devil realm rarely believed in love, they only believed in strength. Since Yang Chen's strength was not enough to deter Gong Sunling and the 5 female slaves, then Gong Sunling and the female slaves' current performance was that they were afraid of the forces behind Yang Chun. This kind of inference was easy to form. A person with a great background, his own cultivation base was not bad, and he also had a concubine with a similar cultivation base and 5 more powerful female slaves. This kind of person was not to be trifled with. Absolutely no one doubted whether Yang Chun and Gong Sunling were disciples of the Devil Clan. This kind of behavior, except for the disciples of the Devil Clan, no one could do it. Counting on those old, stubborn Taoist sects? Beautiful women would die of old age, and they would not enjoy it. Although Yang Chen and his party had made it very blatantly and high profile that they were not to be trifled with, there were still some people who did not believe this. When the ship slowly flew to a mountain pass hundreds of miles away from the small city, two strange and peerless figures directly blocked the front of the ship. Boy, no matter who you are, you have to pay a toll to enter the 9 secluded demon iron mining area. Two guys suddenly appeared, and one of them, a fat man, shouted loudly. Of the two figures, one was abnormally emaciated and looked emaciated. His face was pale, and he looked like a walking skeleton with a thin layer of skin on the outside. The other figure who spoke was completely the opposite. Standing there, it was clear that he was a round meatball, and the fat on his face almost buried his facial features. Both of them were wearing black robes with a white skull embroidered on their chests and backs. It was unknown which sect it was, or which big shot's mark it belonged to. While shouting, their eyes were like swimming fish, looking around the hazy figures of the 5 women, and there was a burst of lewd smiles on their faces, without concealing it. When did such a rule come into being? Yang Chen seemed to not see the skull embroidered on the chest of the two, and buried his head in Gong Sunling's chest, and asked disdainfully, "This is a rule set by my old ancestor last month." The thin man continued, glanced at the women, and suddenly said, "If you are not willing to pay the toll, you can use your maidservants as compensation." "What if I am not willing?" Yang Chen raised his head from Gong Sunling's neck, glanced at the two guys, and suddenly asked, "Isn't killing prohibited here recently? What do you do to me?" "Killing is not allowed. That is the rule set by my old ancestor." The fat man replied proudly, "If you don't abide by my old ancestor's rule, then don't blame us for being rude." The implication was that the rules were set by them, and naturally, whether it was against the rules or not, it was up to them. If Yang Chen was sensible, he should know what to do. Sure enough, Yang Chen nodded. "I know what to do." Chapter 7:13. As soon as Yang Chen's voice fell, Wan Qian's 5 female apprentices suddenly flew up like butterflies, and with a flash, they surrounded the fat man and the thin man in the middle. The two of them were stunned, and the fat man seemed to see something strange and laughed. "Do you want to fight? Do you know what the consequences of fighting are?" "I don't know." Yang Chen shook his head directly and said to the two, "So I want to see what will happen if I fight." Brush. 5 flying swords flew up, and the blissful witch's array was displayed by 5 women at the peak of the Jedon stage. The combat power was so strong that it could even be compared with the 2 Yuanying stage ancestors. The fat man and the thin man were only at the middle stage of the Jedon stage. They thought that by relying on the reputation of their ancestors, they could eat Yang Chen, but they did not expect to be besieged by Yang Chen's order. The blissful witch's array was originally a demonic array. When the 5 women in revealing clothes displayed it, the charming illusions could capture people's souls. Those who had a slightly weaker will immediately have their minds taken away. Not to mention the middle stage of the Jedon stage. Even if it was the middle stage of the Yuanying stage, if they were not careful, they would fall into the trap and be unable to extricate themselves. The two guys were lustful people. Otherwise, they would not have found an excuse to embarrass Yang Chen. Once the formation was activated, the two's eyes were instantly filled with enchanting figures. It was as if the world around them was only left with graceful images and soul-stirring moans. How could the two still be able to control themselves? They were instantly bewitched and made a fool of themselves. Gong Sunling was outside the array, and of course, she also saw the 5 women's blissful witches' array. She was originally an array cultivator. For such an array, in her shyness, she couldn't help but look at it more. She leaned on Yang Chen's body, but she also felt that her body was hot, and she couldn't control herself. After a few glances, Gong Sunling didn't dare to look anymore. She hurriedly shrank her head into Yang Chen's arms, but her heart began to beat wildly. Even though Gong Sunling had been imagining herself as Yang Chen's concubine for the past few days, she had not truly done it. She was usually intimate with Yang Chen because Gong Sunling had already made up her mind about it, And because she was in the evil cult's territory, she had to pretend that she had no choice but to do it, but she was incredibly happy in her heart. However, the moment she looked at the blissful witch's array, she already saw herself as Yang Chen's woman. Gong Sunling almost lost herself in it. Although Gong Sunling was willing to give herself to Yang Chen, she was not willing to do it at this time and place. Under shyness, she could only shrink herself in Yang Chen's arms like a frightened ostrich, and her delicate body was trembling slightly. Yang Chen could certainly feel the trembling of the body of the beautiful woman in his arms. The blissful witch's array was passed on to the 5 women by him, and of course he knew the power. His heart moved. It was originally a posture of 2 people hugging each other, but he lowered his head and reached the top of Gong Sunling's head. As soon as the highest mystery Yin-Yang Heart Sutra was launched, Gong Sunling's mood suddenly calmed down. Gong Sunling was calm, but the fat man and the thin man could no longer hold on. As soon as the array was opened, the 2 of them even lost their desire to fight, but their eyes were confused, and they stared at the 5 women's figures stupidly, drooling, and making a fool of themselves. The 5 women did not kill them, but just trapped the 2 of them. It was Yang Chen who really made a move. The blood phantom vine flying sword was pointed on the belly of the fat man, and then the fat man directly turned into a bag of bones like his partner at a speed visible to the naked eye. The fat man's original clothes became very fat in a moment, and almost slipped off his shoulders. And the thin Yang Chen did not let it go. It was just a light touch, and the guy who was already skinny became more and more like a skeleton. Although both swords were cut on the people, the fat man and the thin man did not die. Yang Chen controlled the blood phantom vine flying sword like a finger and arm, and he could absorb as much flesh and blood as he wanted. Suddenly suffering from this sharp pain, even the most charming scene vanished into thin air. The 2 of them immediately woke up, but after seeing the situation in front of them, they were terrified. You really dare to fight? The fat man saw that he suddenly became a large pile of soft skin and wrinkled skeleton, and he almost fainted. However, the thin man didn't change much, but he couldn't move, but he could still speak. I did it. What should I do next? Yang Chen glanced at the 2 of them and asked calmly. The 2 of them have now completely realized that they have hit a big iron plate. Immediately, the thin man's tone changed. I am really sorry. It was our fault just now. You are a big man, and let us 2 nameless pawns go. Please look at the face of the ancestor and spare our lives. The 2 of them had to admit defeat, and the killing intent in Yang Chen's eyes was already undisguised. The 2 of them never thought that someone could scare them to this point with just a casual glance. The people of the Devil Cultivator never cared about the problem of face. It was normal to kowtow and beg for mercy at the moment of life and death. Gong Sunling next to him seemed to have never seen such a guy without character in a few days. She couldn't help but raise her head and look at the 2 with disdain. The ancestor is nearby and is still waiting for us to report. We know what to say. Please spare our lives. Of course, the fat man didn't dare to maintain his strength, so he added in a low voice. However, his words still reminded Yang Chen that they were the people of a certain ancestor and that the ancestor was nearby. Aling, tell me, how should we deal with them? Yang Chen lowered his head and asked Gong Sunling. He casually wiped Gong Sunling's face like a veteran of romance. I don't like them. Gong Sunling didn't say how to deal with them, but she expressed her opinion. Immediately, the fat man and the thin man found that Yang Chen's eyes were looking at them with a more determined, killing intent. Their own woman didn't like them, so they had to die. You can't kill us. If you kill us, you will break the rules. The ancestor will not let you go. The thin man was keenly aware of the crisis and hurriedly shouted at Yang Chen. Between life and death, there was no room for him to think more. It's not worth offending the ancestor for a woman. Who will know if I kill you? Yang Chen sneered and mercilessly shattered the hopes of the fat man and the thin man. Do you really think I will follow the rules of the ancestor? The hearts of the fat man and the thin man sank to the bottom again. Then, the blood demon, Vine Sword, mercilessly pierced the thin man's throat. In front of the fat man's eyes, the thin man's body completely turned into a skeleton, and there was nothing left. "Spare me! Spare me!" The fat man finally collapsed and almost shouted at the top of his voice. "I am willing to be your living puppet. Spare me." Chapter 714. Generally speaking, fat people always like a little enjoyment, especially the enjoyment of food, otherwise they will not become that body shape. Although cultivators can change their body shape during cultivation, many people still like to maintain certain characteristics and natural colors, or they have to do so because of a certain cultivation method. For example, Yang Chun has always had the image of a strong man, and this fat man is estimated to be the former reason. Both of them are very lecherous, plus the fat man likes to enjoy. Generally speaking, this kind of person is the most afraid of death. Yang Chun took a fancy to this, so he would kill the thin man in front of the fat man. The horrible scene suddenly made the thin man collapse and shouted out the last words. "Living puppet? Good." Yang Chun shouted, "I'll spare your life." With the cooperation of the collapsed fat man himself, Yang Chun soon completed the initial refining of the living puppet. Living puppets, as the name suggested, were living puppets. Now, Wan Qian's 5 female apprentices belong to this type. However, they're not strictly speaking living puppets. The real living puppets have their own thoughts, but their bodies are controlled by others. What is the demonic weapon that is going to be unearthed? After controlling the collapsed fat man, Yang Chun directly asked the question he wanted to know the most. According to the ancestors' guess, it should be a relic of a predecessor. The fat man said what he knew almost without any hesitation. In this case, he could not hide anything at all. "I don't know why it is buried deep in the 9 secluded demon iron mine area. It has been attacked by the 7th metal chi for thousands of years. Naturally sacrificial refining, it is a rare life source magic tool." Listening to the fat man's narrative, Yang Chen's heart also suddenly relaxed. If it is just a relic of a predecessor, it should not be related to the 7th metal true essence. Moreover, the fat man did not say the 7th metal true essence, only the 7th metal chi. There is a big difference between the two. Yang Chen never believes that the ancestor in the fat man's mouth can't distinguish it. "Who is the ancestor?" Yang Chun asked again. "Patriarch is Patriarch Whitebones. Some people call him Old Demon Whitebones." Fatty answered every question without hesitation. Ancestor Whitebones is an elder of the Netherworld sect. She holds a high position and was the first to set the rule that no killing is allowed here. "Rules? Does he abide by it?" Yang Chun sneered and asked. Ancestor has already killed many people in secret, all of them coveting that demonic tool. Fatty answered honestly. Yang Chun could almost guess that this was a shady business that he had set up himself, but was secretly breaking. He didn't even need to look at the Patriarch's performance. He could guess it just by looking at the way Fatty and Skinny used their power for personal gain. "Have any other experts appeared here?" Yang Chun asked again. It was impossible that no other experts would want a demonic artifact that could tempt the elder of the Netherworld sect, a major demonic sect. "I heard that Lady Fanghua of Yin Yang Demon School said that she would come over, and someone from Wuji Demon School also wants it," Fatty said quickly, "but I haven't seen her appear in person. There are also some rogue cultivators who have come over. At present, the one with the highest cultivation here should be Ancestor Whitebones." After asking some things about the 9 secluded iron mining area again, he felt that there was nothing else to understand. Yang Chun was very direct and sent the fat man to the side of the blood demon vine and became a flower fertilizer. Keeping Fatty, although he would not take the initiative to tell others anything, once he appeared, he would be recognized by others. Maybe it would bring trouble to Yang Chun and Gong Sunling. If Yang Chun was alone, he might not care, but since Gong Sunling was on his side, of course, he would not hesitate to let Fatty disappear. The ship still swaggered in the small town of the 9, secluded demonic iron mine. With such extravagant ostentation, no one would doubt whether Yang Chun was a disciple of the demonic sect, and everyone's mind was on another thing, that was, guessing the origin of Yang Chun. With such a generous offer, the ship was by no means a low-class goods. 5 female slaves at the peak of the Jedon stage, plus a concubine in the Jedon stage. This was just Yang Chun, a small early-stage Jedon stage. He could never have such strength. The only explanation was that Yang Chun was a junior of a great man. Now everyone was guessing who this great man was. Just looking at the magnificent ship, there was no demonic energy. If it weren't for Yang Chun, who had been swaggering through the city with beautiful women, it would definitely be a decent magic weapon. To be able to pretend to be so righteous in the territory of the demonic sect, it seemed to be in line with the characteristics of several old devils. Perhaps the cultivation of the demonic path had reached the extreme, and the legendary old devils seemed to have reached the realm of returning to nature and refining the demonic path. It was normal for them to refine such a magic weapon. No one dared to come forward and take the initiative to have a relationship with Yang Chun. No matter which old devil they guessed was behind Yang Chun, it seemed that they could not easily provoke him. All the old devils were extremely suspicious. Once they were mistaken for approaching him, a junior, with any intention, they would be in trouble. Because of this, Yang Chun had been very quiet and undisturbed since he entered the city, which made Yang Chun very surprised and somewhat satisfied. The less contact with outsiders, the less chance of being exposed. Although the small town was only formed because of the 9 secluded demonic iron mine, all the people were cultivators, and the facilities were very complete. It was simply a huge marketplace. From all kinds of stalls to shops to auction houses, there was no lack of one. Not only that, all kinds of high-end shops and inns were almost everywhere. Many people in the demonic sect liked to enjoy, and they often spent a lot of money for it. Some of them were merchants who did this kind of business. Yang Chun did not lose his face as a dandy young master. After entering the city, he directly found the largest and most luxurious inn, put away the ship, and went straight to the lobby of the inn with Gong Sunling in his arms. There were already 2 beautiful women in the foundation stage who served Yang Chun and brought him to the guest seat. Sitting on the VIP chair in the middle, Yang Chun shouted, "Shopkeeper, clear the place. I want to reserve this inn." "Sir, this is not convenient." The shopkeeper had been waiting inside for a long time. When he heard Yang Chun's request, he immediately showed an embarrassed expression. "There is already a distinguished guest staying in. It is really inconvenient to clear the place." "What? Are you afraid that I don't have spirit stones to pay the bill?" Yang Chun snorted coldly, and a female slave next to him directly threw a small chinquin bag in front of the shopkeeper. Needless to say, there must be a lot of spirit stones in it. Otherwise, how could it be packed in a chinquin bag? Jejejej. While the shopkeeper was still in a dilemma, a crisp and sweet laughter came from inside. "Which family's young master is this? Even this slave has to be driven out?" Chapter 7:15. As soon as this charming laughter came out, the shopkeeper's face showed a relaxed expression. It seemed that as long as this person appeared, there would be nothing to worry about. On the other hand, Yang Chun seemed to have suddenly changed into a different person. At first, he was full of arrogance, but in an instant, he put down his arrogant attitude. His face even showed a trace of fascination. He put on a smile and said directly, "Which sister is this? Your voice is so beautiful." His entire performance was like a lecher who had seen a beautiful woman, and he was almost drooling. Because his performance was so realistic, even Gong Sunling, who had been in Yang Chun's arms, was a little jealous. She could not help but secretly pinch Yang Chun. "Little sister, you can't capture a man's heart like this." Before the person arrived, the coquettish voice had already sounded in everyone's ears again, especially Gong Sunling. She felt as if she was being directly looked at. Gong Sunling did not expect that the other party would be so direct and even comment on her little action. Her little action was clearly seen by the other party, so the little girl Gong Sunling blushed again. A fragrant wind quickly filled the entire living room. Then, a breathtaking woman walked in from the door leisurely. She had an inviolable expression on her face. She was incomparably arrogant, but her performance was completely different from when she had just spoken. Not only was she not wearing as revealing as imagined, but she was also wearing a palace dress that was tightly wrapped. Only the waist was slightly narrowed, showing a beautiful and amazing figure. Yang Chen's eyes seemed to have been completely attracted by the figure who came in. He stared at the other party's graceful figure and could not move his eyes for a long time. Even Gong Sunling, who was in his arms, seemed to have not expected that the other party would be such a beauty. Judging from a voice, no one would have thought that the other party was actually so beautiful. Such a noble temperament was completely different from the image in everyone's mind. Why? Don't you invite me to sit down? The beauty came in and saw that Yang Chun was completely stunned, so she could not help but ask. As soon as she opened her mouth, Yang Chun immediately heard a completely different tone. If one were to say that the voice he heard outside was slutty, then the voice he heard right now was that of a saintess. Sister, please sit. Yang Chen's performance was almost like that of a pervert. As he spoke, his body was about to stand up to welcome the guest. Gong Sunling pouted and held Yang Chun with both hands, not letting go, which also hindered his action of standing up. Her action, as if she was protecting her food, was especially obvious in the eyes of the crowd. Little girl, men don't like girls who are too jealous. The beauty sat down gracefully and did not talk to Yang Chun. Instead, she smiled at Gong Sunling again and said, "You have to put yourself in his shoes at all times so that you can hold his heart tightly." After that, the beauty's eyes turned from Gong Sunling's face to Yang Chen's face. She just glanced at him and said with a smile, "Little Lang Jun, you have 6 stunning beauties with you, but all of them are virgins. Have you reached the 3rd level of the jade cultivation method? Do you want me to dedicate myself to you?" As soon as Yang Chun heard about the jade cultivation method, his face suddenly changed slightly. This change was seen by the opposite woman, and she realized that she had guessed the origin of Yang Chun. The biggest problem of Gong Sunling pretending to be Yang Chen's concubine was that they had not done the deed of husband and wife. They were both virgins. It was relatively easy to fool ordinary people, but the real masters could still see it easily. However, the jade cultivation method, mentioned by the beauty, was the best explanation for this situation. The jade cultivation method was a kind of double cultivation magic, but it was a double cultivation magic that favored the man. After the beginning of practicing the jade cultivation method, the man who practiced this method must take 1 or more beautiful virgins with him, but he could not take their chastity. Women's practice would stimulate the formation of a large amount of pure yin qi in their bodies, and men relied on absorbing the pure yin qi of these virgins every day to practice. The better the aptitude of the woman who practiced the jade cultivation method, the greater the benefits for the man. Of course, since it was a double cultivation method, there were many benefits for the woman. At least one was that the woman's body and skin would get better, and she would be more attractive. In the 1st and 2nd level of the jade cultivation method, it was absolutely forbidden to have sex. Otherwise, all the previous efforts would be wasted. Only after reaching the 3rd level could one lose their virginity to practice. At this time, the woman who lost her virginity was not necessarily a woman who practiced the jade cultivation method. When they lost their virginity, there were great benefits for both men and women. The man would absorb the yin essence of the woman's body, and his skill would be greatly improved. Similarly, the yang essence of the man who practiced the jade cultivation method and abstinence was also of great benefit to the woman. Even in many cases, it was the best tonic for women to break through the bottleneck. Not only that, but the biggest benefit of having sex with a man who practiced the jade cultivation method was that the appearance was not old. This had a fatal attraction for women, regardless of their cultivation base. The other party said the jade cultivation method in a word, and then saw Yang Chen's slight shock. Her heart suddenly had an idea. Without saying a word, she waved her hands, and a ribbon flew out of her sleeve and instantly strangled the shopkeeper's neck. She raised her hand lightly, and the 2 beauties of the foundation stage who served next to her fell down. Kala, the sound of the shopkeeper's neck being broken sounded almost instantaneously. Then the woman seemed to have done something inconspicuous. She smiled at Yang Chun and said, "It's elder sister who was impulsive. She shouldn't have said this in front of them." The benefits of the jade cultivation method were greater for men, but made countless women scramble for it. especially when it was necessary to break through the third layer. The appearance was not old, and the benefits of breaking through the realm were enough to make the masters of the Deshang stage tempted. If this news spread out, Yang Chun would definitely be snatched by countless female devils as a rare treasure. So the beauty on the opposite side did not say anything and directly killed the insider. As for the 5 women around Yang Chun, they were obviously also insiders, but it was not good to make a move. The third layer of the jade cultivation method not only perfectly solved the flaw of Gong Sunling's virginity, but also provided the best reason for her to want to dominate Yang Chen all the time. No wonder Gong Sunling had to stay in Yang Chen's arms. She was afraid that others would take away Yang Chen's treasure. I don't know how to call sister. The beauty did not say anything to kill, but Yang Chen did not seem to see it. He just greedily stared at the beauty's beautiful face, looking up and down, and asked at the same time, "I'm your lowly concubine, Xiao Fanghua." The beautiful woman opposite her put on the most virtuous posture and said her name. Chapter 716. Xiao Fanghua. Yang Chen's eyes narrowed sharply, and he remembered a person, Lady Fanghua. The elder of Yin Yang Demon School turned out to be in this inn, which was something that Yang Chen did not expect. The strength of the peak Yuanying stage also added countless variables to Yang Chen's trip. "I don't dare. I greet the young master." Lady Fanghua once again bowed slightly to Yang Chen, but her eyes never left Yang Chen's face. She asked with a smile, "How is the old ancestor?" Of course, the Jade Law was also a unique skill of an old devil. Yang Chen could cultivate to the third layer. He must be the descendant of the old ancestor. Even Lady Fanghua did not dare to be rude to the legendary old ancestor who was almost about to ascend. "The old ancestor is very good. Thanks for Sister Fanghua's concern." Yang Chen laughed and became generous, and his eyes were no longer so lascivious. Cultivating the Jade Law to the third layer. In the case of several beautiful concubines around him at any time, he could still maintain their virginity. If he wanted to show a lecherous appearance, it would be a bit too much. Yang Chen immediately returned to his normal appearance. However, Gong Sunling did not intend to leave Yang Chen's arms at all. She just hugged Yang Chen tightly, staring at the noble and incomparable Lady Fanghua as if she was looking at a life and death enemy. If the gaze was a knife, Lady Fanghua would have already been riddled with holes. Lady Fanghua certainly noticed the unfriendly gaze of Gong Sunling. If Gong Sunling was not a concubine beside Yang Chen, such a gaze, Lady Fanghua would have already killed her. To be able to make such a name for herself in the territory of the demon clan, Lady Fanghua did not only rely on the power of Yin Yang Demon School, but more importantly, her own killing spree. "Little sister, you're only at the early gold core stage. It's really a waste of a treasure like this." However, since she was one of Yang Chen's people, Lady Fanghua did not want to offend her. She could only explain to Gong Sunling with unprecedented patience, "I only want a night of pleasure. If you're willing, I'll do whatever you want. As long as I can do it, I won't refuse." Gong Sunling had never thought that there would be a day when a peerlessly noble and beautiful woman, whom she had only met once, would talk to her about making love with her lover in public. Furthermore, she even wanted her to state her conditions. It was as if this matter was just a transaction, a trivial matter that couldn't be more common. If such a thing were to happen in the Tao sect, it would simply be inconceivable. Which female cultivator would be so shameless and talk about these things so blatantly? Even if it was for double cultivation, they should find a private immortal's cave. For a moment, Gong Sunling was directly stunned on the spot and did not know how to answer. However, this situation fell into the eyes of Madame Fanghua, but Gong Sunling was still hesitating and her heart was struggling painfully. "This inn is one of my properties. I'll drive everyone else away and make room for you, young master." Lady Fanghua stood up and no longer talked about this issue with Gong Sunling. Instead, she followed Yang Chen's original intention and vacated the inn for Yang Chen. From the beginning to the end, Lady Fanghua did not seem to hear Yang Chen's reply. However, Lady Fanghua did not care about this. When she killed in front of Yang Chen, She had already shown her determination with her actions. Whether Yang Chen agreed or not, it didn't seem to matter so much. Although the ancestor behind Yang Chen was very scary, he was about to ascend and presumably would not have a disagreement with the Yin Yang Demon School. Moreover, although this matter was of great benefit to Lady Fanghua, it would be of greater benefit to Yang Chen. Yang Chen was only in the early Jidan stage, and with Lady Fanghua, who was in the peak Yuanying stage, the unique characteristics of the jade cultivation method would make Lady Fanghua break through, and Yang Chen would also get at least half of Lady Fanghua's cultivation. Of course, this did not mean that Lady Fanghua's cultivation was directly destroyed, but her spiritual power and spiritual awareness were purified to an incredible level, and the extra part would naturally benefit Yang Chen. The difference between the two was almost close to 2 great realms. This kind of double cultivation could directly raise Yang Chen's cultivation to the peak Jidan stage, and it was even possible to cross the tribulation and form the nascent soul. In Yang Chen's jade cultivation method would also be promoted to the 4th layer. At the 4th layer, Yang Chen could have double cultivation with the woman he liked at will, without worrying about the restrictions of any cultivation method. In fact, when the 3rd layer of the jade cultivation method was broken, the higher the cultivation base of a woman, the better. To put it bluntly, a master of the Deshang stage might be able to take this opportunity to break through. Lady Fanghua got such a treasure now. How could she let it go to others? Fortunately, it was Lady Fanghua. If it was someone else, they might not know the mystery of the jade cultivation method. The elders of Yin Yang Demon School were more knowledgeable in this regard than others. Yang Chen and Gong Sunling never thought that just letting Gong Sunling disguise as their own concubine, pretending to be a member of the demon sex, because of the virginity of Gong Sunling and the 5 female slaves, it would make Lady Fanghua have such a big misunderstanding. The unexpected thing had happened, but Yang Chen seemed to have encountered a fun opportunity. When Lady Fanghua arranged everything and lived in the most luxurious inn, there was no one else to monitor them. After arranging the restrictions, Yang Chen laughed. Gong Sunling never knew what the jade cultivation method was. Although the previous performance just showed her position, of course, she still had to ask clearly at this time. After Yang Chen explained the jade cultivation method to Gong Sunling didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How did things inexplicably develop to this point? In the misunderstanding, Yang Chen became the delicious cake in the eyes of the female demons, and they all rushed to beg to have a night with Yang Chen. Unfortunately, the cultivators of the jade cultivation method only had this opportunity to lose their virginity, and the cultivation conditions were harsh. In the 1st and 2nd layer, they had to be intimate with beautiful women every day, but they could not act like animals. If their mind was not strong enough, they would directly die from chi deviation. If there were no such difficulties, it was estimated that all the men of the demon sex would cultivate the jade cultivation method. However, it was precisely because of the harsh cultivation of the jade cultivation method that it led to thousands of years that it seemed that only the old ancestor had successfully cultivated it. As soon as the fake Yang Chen appeared and was discovered by Lady Fanghua, it was estimated that even at the risk of offending the old ancestor, she would have to taste her long-cherished wish. Not to mention the improvement of the realm after the breakthrough, Lady Fanghua could also become a master of the Deshang stage. Her appearance was not old. It was enough for a beautiful woman to give up all her wealth. Chapter 717. Lady Fanghua wasn't a pervert, nor was she a rash person. Therefore, she didn't ask to have sex with Yang Chen right away. The jade cultivation technique was a dual cultivation technique. Of course, both parties had to be willing. How could Lady Fanghua, who had seen many men, not understand this? Yin Yang Demon School was a sect that practiced Yin and Yang dual cultivation. All the disciples were famous for their Yin and Yang integration technique. As an elder of Yin Yang Demon School, Lady Fanghua was naturally the best of the best. To deal with men and let men fall in love with themselves, Madame Fanghua, compared to Gong Sunling, who only knew how to be tired of Yang Chen's body and not let go of the green little girl's experience, she did not know how many times richer. To put it bluntly, to seduce a man, Madame Fanghua's eyes were 100 times stronger than Gong Sun Ling, who was so greasy in a man's body and did not give a man any space for privacy. Young master, although I only asked for a single night of pleasure, I am still a pure and innocent girl. Even if young master doesn't abandon me, we have to be in love with each other. When Madame Fanghua wore the most conservative palace dress, only the most attractive line was revealed, plus the noble and beautiful face. When she said this with an inviolable expression, it really made people have a strange feeling. Yang Chun looked at the eyes of Madame Fanghua at that time. Although there was some pretended anxiousness, but what kind of person was Madame Fanghua? She had read countless people. How could she not see that Yang Chun really had such a trace of love? As long as Yang Chun was a little tempted, Lady Fanghua was confident that she could make Yang Chun fall in love with her. For a man, the happiest thing wasn't to obtain a woman who was obedient, but to conquer an unconquerable, cold, and beautiful woman. Lady Fanghua's behavior at the moment was completely in line with the image of a woman who could most arouse a man's desire to conquer. She was beautiful, noble, and had an outstanding temperament. She looked as pure as ice and as clean as jade. Even though her mouth was flowery, she was never pretentious towards men. As long as it was a man, he would love to press such a woman under his body and ravage her to his heart's content. Only then would he feel a strange sense of satisfaction. Moreover, Lady Fanghua's identity is noble. Yin Yang Demon School is almost the same status as the Blue Cloud sect and the Green Jade Immortal Island sect. The status of the elder of Yin Yang Demon School is almost at the top. Conquering such a noble woman would definitely make anyone excited just thinking about it. What made people's blood boil was that Lady Fanghua's reputation was really as pure as ice and clean as jade. Although she was the elder of the #1 dual cultivation sect in diabolism, Lady Fanghua had never been rumored to have an affair with any man. Her reputation was built by killing people. It was not known how many guys who coveted her beauty had become a stepping stone under her fame. The reason why she was called Madam was not because Lady Fanghua was already a suitable person, but because of her status and position, it was natural for those people to call her Madam. The demon sects rarely called her a fairy, but they called her Madam a lot. As soon as the words pure girl came out, coupled with this deliberate performance, it seemed that the relationship between Yang Chun and Lady Fanghua suddenly changed. It was not that Lady Fanghua wanted to push down Yang Chun, but Yang Chun asked Lady Fanghua to let her accept it. This was the strength of Lady Fanghua. She turned a matter that was beneficial to both sides, and it was something that she wanted, into a role-playing conquest game. She almost grasped the man's mind accurately. I want you to have sex with me, but you still have to beg me to allow you to have sex with me. The position of the host and the guest was reversed in an instant. Even Yang Chun could not help but secretly applaud the performance of this stunner. This cheap concubine is not a casual person. Before the young master, this cheap concubine does not dare to ask for the identity of a concubine. I only ask to be a slave and follow the young master. Madame Fanghua's words were not all, and then she said this again. She followed him around as a servant, but she refused to give herself to him no matter what. She put herself in a low position, but she did not pretend to be a virgin. She behaved like a chaste woman, which could definitely stimulate a man's desire to conquer to the point of bursting. Sometimes, the process of conquering and pursuing was even more wonderful than the result. Lady Fanghua was well aware of this, and her little means were used to perfection. If it was someone else, it would definitely be itchy, and they could not wait to immediately use various means to please her in order to get close to her. When Lady Fanghua was really like Gong Sunling, with a black veil covering her face, standing respectfully behind Yang Chun, waiting for orders at any time. Before Yang Chun began to conquer, he had already enjoyed a great sense of satisfaction. Think about it, a beautiful woman at the peak of the Yuanying stage. In addition to not being able to touch her, she was obedient in other things and showed it in front of people. How proud and satisfied was that? Especially when this beauty still had a great reputation in the local area, and countless people had to look up to her. When others looked at him, what kind of envy, jealousy, and hatred would they have? What kind of vanity would it be? What kind of satisfaction and pride would it be? In terms of grasping people's hearts, especially the realm of men's hearts, Lady Fanghua was definitely at the level of a great master, and almost no one could match her. Young master, don't agree. Gong Sumling had almost played the image of a concubine whose status was threatened, and she had to brush the image of a small temperament and stubbornly spoiled concubine. After seeing Madame Fanghua doing this, the first reaction was to act coquettishly and plead with Yang Chun. In fact, Gong Sumling was really afraid that Yang Chun would really be tempted by this woman. Even as a woman, Gong Sumling could feel the great attraction of Lady Fanghua, which was by no means a few revealing clothes could compete with the other party. In the past, Gong Sumling always thought that as long as she was beautiful, she could get many people to pursue her. For example, Cold Plum Fairy Shi Shan Shan, Dancing Snow Fairy Sun Qing Xue, and even herself, including Gao Yu. There were many young handsome men who expressed their love, but they all refused. Now in the face of this Lady Fanghua of the demon sect, Gong Sumling really realized that even if people wrapped themselves tightly, did not show a little bit of their faces, and even did not pretend to be indifferent, they could also make men fascinated. At this moment, Gong Sumling felt that she and Gao Yu were greatly threatened. Why not? Yang Chen's reaction really confirmed Gong Sumling's worries, and he actually agreed to the request of Lady Fanghua. This made Gong Sumling's heart sink instantly. "Madam," Yang Chun just called, and he was interrupted by Lady Fanghua. "Young master, this slave does not dare to be called madam. Please call this slave Fanghua." "In Fanghua." Yang Chun immediately changed his words. "This young master wants to buy a batch of 9 secluded demon iron essence. Take the young master to see it." "Yes, young master." Lady Fanghua bowed and agreed, and then went out with Yang Chun. Chapter 718. Of course, Lady Fanghua did not really want to be Yang Chen's slave. The reason for doing this, in addition to letting Yang Chun willingly cooperate, was that there was another intention. Even if a pig was slaughtered, it had to be fattened before it was killed. Although the Jade Law was magical, it also depended on a fire. Judging from the performance of Yang Chun and Gong Sumling, Yang Chun had just stepped into the 3rd layer of the Jade Law. Although he could lose his virginity at this point, the higher the cultivation base of Yang Chen's Jade Law, the better the effect would be. During this time, in addition to making Yang Chun intoxicated, Lady Fanghua's plan was to improve Yang Chen's cultivation base. With her knowledge of the peak Yuanying stage and some secret means, of course, she could see that Yang Chun was now at the peak of the early Jidan stage. As long as he could have another breakthrough, she would naturally get more benefits. Yang Chen's highest cultivation base was the spirit power of the first wood attribute, which was also the result of the nourishment of the huge first wood spiritual solution. Similarly, the wood attribute was the spiritual root attribute that Yang Chun actively showed after coming to the demon sect's territory. Whether it was the spiritual power or the flying sword, they were all of the wood attribute. If she wanted to improve Yang Chen's cultivation base, it seemed that she needed to work hard on the wood attribute spirit power and medicinal pills. Lady Fanghua had already begun to think about how to help Yang Chen improve. The current relationship between Lady Fanghua and Yang Chun was not so much a master and servant or cooperation. It was better to say that they were being held hostage and being held hostage. Lady Fanghua did not wait for Yang Chun to say yes from the beginning to the end. It was not until the situation she had just shown aroused Yang Chen's desire to conquer that she heard Yang Chen's promise. Before that, regardless of whether Yang Chun agreed or not, Lady Fanghua had secretly put Yang Chun under house arrest in the inn. With her peak Yuanying stage cultivation base, she believed that Yang Chun could never escape her control. And Yang Chun did not make any extra movements. It seemed that he had acquiesced to this situation. After all, in the consciousness of Madame Fanghua, Yang Chun still had a powerful ancestor. If it was not necessary, she would never provoke him. Yang Chun also needed to use the power of Lady Fanghua to do his own things. Therefore, so far, The two sides have been treated with courtesy and have not torn each other. Now that Madame Fenghua wanted to raise pigs and play role-playing games with Yang Chun, Yang Chen naturally had to cooperate. When Madame Fenghua, who had always been a peerless beauty, became a slave of Yang Chun and appeared in the small town, the whole city boiled for a while. Madame Fenghua did not make her real name in the small town. The fat man and the thin man did not know Madame Fenghua, but they also heard the news of Madame Fenghua from the mouth of the white-bone old demon. Although most people did not know the true identity of Madame Fenghua, she could control the most luxurious inn and her own peak yuaning stage cultivation base. This woman had already made many people have a heart to steal. As for those who knew the identity of Madame Fenghua, they did not dare to have any neglect. But now the identity of the small town was almost the most distinguished woman. In less than a few hours, she became a slave of Yang Chun, and even her status was not as good as the little Jidan stage woman in Yang Chen's arms, which caused countless speculations. What was the identity of Yang Chun in the end? Without any big conflict, he made Madame Fenghua obediently become his slave, standing behind him obediently. It seemed that she still belonged to the category of letting Yang Chun do whatever he wanted. What kind of background could make a master of the peak yuaning stage so afraid? As for those who knew the identity of Madame Fenghua, they directly began to guess the identity of Yang Chun as the heir of the Demon Lord. Otherwise, it was impossible to explain how the elder of Yin Yang Demon School would be willing to become a slave of a junior in the early Jidan stage. The bodies of the innkeeper and the two beauties were even carried out and thrown away without any concealment. It was more and more true to some things. It should be that Yang Chun was unhappy, so Lady Fenghua personally killed the 3 people to please Yang Chun. No one could guess the true identity of Yang Chun, but everyone had a consensus that was never provoke Yang Chun. This was the mining area of the 9 secluded demon iron. The 9 secluded demon iron essence that Yang Chun wanted was almost available in every family in the Shang dynasty. However, the best quality and the highest level were still in the auction house. Madame Fenghua directly came to the auction house with Yang Chun. When the group arrived, the person in charge of the auction house almost crawled out to meet them in person and respectfully led Yang Chun to the auction house. "Young master, here is the best 9 secluded demon iron essence." In front of the frightened person in charge of the auction house, Madame Fenghua was very respectful to Yang Chun. After reporting this sentence, she immediately turned to the person in charge of the auction house. "Why don't you take out your best 9 secluded demon iron essence and let the young master choose?" Presumptuous! Gong Sunling in Yang Chen's arms suddenly shouted, "The young master hasn't decided yet. Is it your turn to point fingers?" The person in charge of the auction house knew the true identity of Lady Fenghua. Gong Sunling's scolding almost scared the person in charge of the auction house. A little woman in the early Jidan stage dared to scold Lady Fenghua like this? But what was even more frightening was the performance of Lady Fenghua. Being reprimanded by a Jidan stage junior, Lady Fenghua did not show any anger. She actually bowed her head and apologized. Yes, this slave was arbitrary. Although he had already seen that Lady Fenghua appeared as a slave at the beginning, the person in charge of the auction house still had a trace of luck in his heart. Even if Lady Fenghua bowed her head, she would still have her own temper. He didn't expect this scene in front of him to be so shocking. For a time, the legs of the person in charge of the auction house trembled a little, and he didn't know what to do next. Should he take out the 9 secluded demonic iron essence himself, or not take it out? The auction house has the rules of the auction house. Since there is something, wait for the auction. Gong Sunling continued, "Manager, when will there be an auction? When will there be an auction of the 9 secluded demonic iron essence? My young master will stay for a few days. Let me know when you are ready." "There will be one in a few days. There will be one in a few days." The auctioneer hurriedly bowed and replied. When he looked up, he suddenly saw Lady Fenghua staring at him. He hurriedly changed his words. "Tomorrow. There will be an auction tomorrow. The 9 secluded demonic iron essence will also be auctioned." "Well, My young master will come to the auction tomorrow. Gong Sunling directly made the decision for Yang Chun. Then she turned to Yang Chun and said in a soft voice, "Young master, do you like this?" Chapter 719. Gong Sunling was very worried that Yang Chun would not be able to hold it. However, all this worry disappeared when Yang Chun touched her forehead intimately. Yang Chun clearly passed his mind to Gong Sunling through the spiritual awareness double cultivation method. At least he was not lost for the time being. Yang Chun used a small trick here. What he told Gong Sunling was that he was not confused by Lady Fanghua for the time being. However, what would happen in the future, he needed the help of Gong Sunling. In order to prevent Yang Chun from falling into the charm of the female devil, Gong Sunling had to do her best to help Yang Chun. Of course, the first point was to fight against Lady Fanghua and not let Yang Chun be controlled by Lady Fanghua. This opportunity is really rare. Even if I am jealous, it is also a kind of cultivation. Yang Chun clearly passed this thought to Gong Sunling. Senior sister can treat this as a battle, a cultivation. Try to defeat the enemy. Maybe your mental state will improve. For cultivators, almost all of their inner demons would run through the entire cultivation process. Negative emotions like jealousy were also a kind of inner demon. Yang Chun did not exaggerate when he said that this was a battle. If Gong Sunling planted the seed of inner demons in her heart because of this, it would be very troublesome in the future. It was better to take advantage of this opportunity to overcome this negative emotion. From another perspective, this was also a very rare game. Even if it was not for jealousy as the goal, it was also a rare experience in terms of increasing knowledge. Of course, Yang Chun would not be unable to control the state of mind of a great principal golden immortal, not to mention a little peak yuanying stage demon girl. Even if it was a great principal golden immortal, after Yang Chun killed tens of thousands of immortals, they could not confuse Yang Chun. The blood river was enough to keep Yang Chun clear-headed no matter what kind of temptations he was facing. However, Yang Chun's words could make Gong Sunling completely immerse herself in it, which would be of great benefit to Gong Sunling's cultivation. Her concern for Yang Chun would allow Gong Sunling to display a stunning performance that exceeded her own strength, and the appropriate jealous performance just now proved this point. Since Lady Fanghua wanted to play this game, and in order to give Yang Chun a sense of satisfaction, she defined herself as Yang Chun's slave. Then in terms of identity, Gong Sunling, as a concubine, had a higher status than Lady Fanghua, so such a scolding was reasonable. That's exactly what I want. Yang Chun gently pinched Gong Sunling's little nose with satisfaction and said with satisfaction. At the same time, he secretly gave Lady Fanghua a provocative look. The two were fighting, but Yang Chun had Gong Sunling as a helper, so he seemed to have the upper hand. But in the eyes of Lady Fanghua, she did not feel that she had lost. On the contrary, since Gong Sunling had such a performance, then there would be a second time. Soon, Yang Chun would find out how annoying a woman who was jealous of her man was. Naturally, she would think of his own good and obediently come to his side. Lady Fanghua was very clear about the characteristics of the Raising Jade Law. The more harmonious Yang Chun's mind was with her, the more benefits she would get. Naturally, she would rely on this game to deepen the tacit understanding with Yang Chun. Gong Sunling, a seemingly bold and unrestrained little girl, was definitely not her opponent. Both sides had their own thoughts. Lady Fanghua felt that she had already won a small game. At the moment, she still put on a proud but respectful face, bowed and asked, "What else can I do for you, young master? Go around and see if there are any good things here." Yang Chun ordered, went out and boarded the shrunken ship, took the 6 women and Lady Fanghua, and slowly flew to another shop. Until watching Yang Chun and Lady Fanghua enter the opposite shop, the shopkeeper of the auction house softened his legs and sat on the ground with a thud. I don't know when his whole body has been soaked in cold sweat. Although the shopkeeper was already in the Jidan stage and rarely sweated, he still sweated heavily just now. Not long ago, there was news of the birth of the demonic weapon, and there was such a mysterious devil incarnate here. It seemed that this 9 secluded demonic iron mining area would be troubled, and there would be no peace. After a stroll, the small town was almost turned upside down. Yang Chun returned to the inn with Gong Sunling and Lady Fanghua again. Young master, madam, these are some toys prepared by the slave for madam. Please accept them. In front of others, Lady Fanghua was still the high and mighty Lady Fanghua. After Yang Chun and Gong Sunling were settled, Lady Fanghua came to the room of Yang Chun and Gong Sunling with a group of beautiful women in the foundation establishment stage. This row of little beauties, each holding a jade plate in their hands, but there were a lot of good things on the plate. Yang Chun glanced at it, several kinds of medicinal pills, several kinds of rare earth attribute materials, and so on. 7 orifices devil embryo pill, Xianming devil soil, etc., were excellent items needed by earth attribute cultivators, and even a few beautiful dresses were included. These were all given to Gong Sunling. It was rare for Lady Fanghua to come up with so many good things in such a short time. It seemed that she had even used her savings. All of them were given to Gong Sunling. Could it be that she just wanted to win a smile from Gong Sunling? Gong Sunling was very happy, and once again showed in front of Lady Fanghua that she was young and easy to buy. She did not use her natural beauty as a capital, and only knew how to wear revealing clothes and act intimately to seduce Yang Chun. Greed, narrow-mindedness, jealousy, all of this could only explain one thing. Gong Sunling was no match for Lady Fanghua. At least Lady Fanghua thought so. The more shortcomings Gong Sunling showed, the more it set off Lady Fanghua's understanding. Coupled with the unique attraction of being obedient in front of others, it was enough to tie Yang Chun firmly to her belt. These women were given to the young master by this slave. Madame Fanghua waited for Gong Sunling to accept the things before she continued to speak. Young master, don't accept them. Gong Sunling began to object directly. Lady Fanghua laughed in her heart. This is not allowed. That is not allowed. Which man can stand this? The more Gong Sunling wanted to hold Yang Chun tightly. In fact, the more she pushed Yang Chun into her arms. These female disciples are virgins. Today, they have taken special medicinal pills to stimulate the qi of primordial yin. It is an excellent tonic for young master's great method. Lady Fanghua appropriately showed her consideration for Yang Chun and said respectfully, "In a few days, I will send a batch of Jidan stage virgins so that young master's cultivation will go to the next level." Chapter 720. Lady Fanghua did this completely for her own consideration. The higher the cultivation of Yang Chen's jade cultivation method, the greater the benefits she would get. In the same way, Yang Chun would get more benefits. Jade cultivation method was one of the few cultivation methods of Devil Path that could benefit others and oneself. However, it was not easy to cultivate. It was not easy to find such a treasure. Lady Fanghua wished that she could not leave Yang Chun for a moment. The reason why she wanted to be Yang Chen's slave was to be able to stay with Yang Chun. She said that she did not care, but she was still afraid that Gong Sunling would steal it. Before Yang Chen's jade cultivation method could go further, she would lose Yang Chen's virginity in advance. Then, Lady Fanghua's arrangement would be in vain. Lady Fanghua was a person who liked luxury and enjoyment. Everything here was very exquisite, a series of decorations. Even if Yang Chun had seen the magnificence of the heavenly court, he was still full of praise here. "Young master, please have a meal." When it was time for dinner, a pretty little maid came to Madame Fanghua to signal. Lady Fanghua immediately asked people to line up and send the dinner up. The dinner that was sent was also extremely gorgeous, with all kinds of delicacies. It was rare that in this small city, Lady Fanghua could get so many ingredients. What was more rare was that each of the delicacies seemed to contain a strong power of primordial yin. It seemed that was a nourishing meal specially prepared for Yang Chun. And Lady Fanghua, like a dutiful maid, personally placed all the dishes in front of Yang Chun. With a sacred expression on her face, she said the words of a maid, "Young master, please eat." And these are the power of primordial yin. Of course, Yang Chun tasted the taste of the dishes and was a little surprised. Even with his experience as an almighty immortal, he did not know how to make the dishes contain the power of primordial yin. These are hundreds of virgins with successful cultivation. After taking a special elixir and practicing a unique cultivation method, when the chef is cooking, it will always be added to the dishes. That's why there is such an effect. Lady Fanghua explained quickly. It tastes good. Yang Qin nodded and picked up a chopstick for Gong Sunling in his arms. Then he threw a wine jar directly from a Chinquan bag and ordered without looking up, "Pour the wine." "Yes, young master." Madame Fanghua did not disobey. She opened the seal of the wine jar. It was not known where she found a jade wine pot. She poured the wine in, then filled the jade cup in front of Yang Chun, and then stood by Yang Chen's side. There were at least 20 of the original subordinates of Lady Fanghua. When had they ever seen Lady Fanghua put on such a posture? All of them resisted the shock and stood there obediently, not daring to move. Even Lady Fanghua was like this, let alone them. Gong Sunling picked up the jade cup with her jade hand and took a sip. Then she looked at Lady Fanghua next to her and gave the wine to Yang Chun with her mouth. Even with the memory of the previous life, when had the cultivation genius Gong Sunling of Chunyang Palace ever been so unrestrained? Previously, no matter how intimate the two of them were, it was just hugging each other and some small movements. How could they be as direct as they were today? After swallowing the jade dragon wine that was given by Gong Sunling, Yang Chen's heart was almost intoxicated. This was given by Gong Sunling on her own initiative. Yang Chun was almost reluctant to let go. He just wanted to taste the wonderful taste of his senior sister's lips. Now there were dozens of people around watching. Even if Gong Sunling was bold, after taking a sip of wine, she did not dare to do anything more. However, Yang Chen's reaction still made Gong Sunling very happy. After their lips parted, she still glanced at Lady Fanghua intentionally or unintentionally, full of provocation. Lady Fanghua did not seem to see it. She just stood aside with a sacred face, but in her heart, she had once again despised Gong Sunling. After Yang Chun drank a few mouthfuls of wine and ate some delicacies, Lady Fanghua clapped her hands. In an instant, the melodious and wonderful music of string and bamboo began to sound. Then, a group of women with only a veil on their bodies entered and began to dance in the spacious hall. Every dancing woman had an excellent figure and appearance. Only the important parts of their bodies were covered with a transparent veil. With the dance movements, from time to time, there would be pink and curved snow exposed in front of Yang Chun and Gong Sunling, which made people's blood boil. The young master's jade law also needs to maintain his mood from time to time. There are some exciting dances. Please comment on it. Madame Fanghua waited for the dancer to start dancing. Then she bowed and said, everything she did was very much like a loyal servant. The jade law needed to maintain the mood from time to time. In fact, it was to make the cultivator always full of desire. This was definitely a painful torment for those who truly cultivated the great jade cultivation method. They had to maintain desire all the time. There were many women around for them to pick, but they could not show off their animal desires. It was simply torture. If it was just tolerated for a while, it was okay. But the cultivation of the jade law in the first and second stages and the third stage would take at least 100 years, and at most hundreds of years. Not to mention the people in the devil path. Even some of the old antiques in Taoism might not be able to persist in this situation. Therefore, Lady Fanghua met a treasure like Yang Chen. It was a miracle comparable to finding a needle in a haystack. How could she not attach great importance to it? Now Yang Chun did not take the food himself. Everything was done by Gong Sunling. Whether it was eating or drinking, it was Gong Sunling who put it into Yang Chen's mouth or put it into her own mouth. There were beautiful beauties singing and dancing in front of him. Yang Chen's meal was extremely comfortable. Fanghua, I heard that the Yin and Yang sect Sky Demon's alluring dance is unparalleled in the world. I wonder if you can let me open my eyes? After watching for a while, Yang Chun lost interest. Just some slightly open dances were not enough to move Yang Chun, so he simply proposed to Lady Fanghua. Young master wants to see the Sky Demon's alluring dance? Lady Fanghua was taken aback. The Sky Demon's alluring dance was the treasure of the Yin and Yang sect. It would not be easily used in front of others. But from the past history, as long as they saw the Sky Demon's alluring dance, no matter men or women, they would be fascinated. Yang Chun actually took the initiative to ask to see the sky demon's alluring dance. Not only Lady Fenghua, but even Gong Sunling was taken aback. Even if she had not seen the sky demon's alluring dance, Gong Sunling had also heard about the power of the sky demon's alluring dance. Even the Yuanying stage masters couldn't help but be fascinated by the sky demon's alluring dance. Don't! Gong Sunling directly covered Yang Chen's mouth, and her eyes showed a worried look. She shook her head at Yang Chun and dissuaded. Don't. Chapter 721. Lady Fenghua, on the other hand, hoped that Yang Chun would insist on watching. In this way, once Yang Chun was addicted to it, he would be firmly under Lady Fenghua's control, and he would never be able to escape. The reason why Lady Fenghua didn't use force was that, firstly, she was afraid of the legendary old devil who was about to ascend, and secondly, she wanted Yang Chun to do it willingly. She had used so many methods in order to make him willingly. As long as she didn't take the initiative to use the heavenly demon's alluring dance to confuse Yang Chun, even if the old devil wanted to make trouble for her, he wouldn't have any reason to do so. Now that Yang Chun had taken the initiative to ask to watch the heavenly demon's alluring dance, he was courting death. Lady Fenghua couldn't help but be tempted. Even if the old devil was in trouble in the future, she could use Yang Chen's own willingness to do it. Yang Chun turned to stare at Lady Fenghua and scolded her with a faint smile. Aren't you going to get ready? Yes, young master. Lady Fenghua looked at Yang Chen's expression. After confirming that he wasn't joking, she finally bowed and said, I'll go get ready now. In less than a moment, more than a dozen young women who looked like ordinary people appeared in front of Yang Chun. Compared to the previous women who were covered in gauze, these women had almost no cultivation. The makeup on their faces was also very delicate and pretty. Their eyes shone with a childish light. They didn't look like experts at all. The music changed, and before the new women could start dancing, the people who had stayed here to serve bowed to Lady Fenghua in unison, then turned around and left the hall. Only Yang Chun, Gong Sunling, the original 5 female slaves, Lady Fenghua, and the new women were left in the room. The dining table had been removed, revealing an empty hall. Young master, please comment. More than a dozen female dancers bowed to Yang Chun in unison, and then each took a position in the hall, slowly dancing along with the music. These new female dancers were not like the previous women who only wore a piece of gauze. Instead, they were tightly wrapped. Their dancing postures were very pleasing to the eye, but there was not the slightest hint of charm. It was unknown where the sound of stringed and bamboo instruments came from, but it seemed to be very neutral and peaceful. It was a kind of elegant dance. After looking for a while, Gong Sunling's face showed a puzzled expression. She really couldn't understand why the demonic's alluring dance, which made everyone's face turn pale at the mention of it, was actually like this. If this was considered an erotic dance, then what were those naked young girls dancing just now? Just when she was about to ask Yang Chun if Lady Fenghua and the others made a mistake, Gong Sunling suddenly found that Yang Chun was actually watching these dance postures with relish, without blinking. Yang Chun was someone that Gong Sunling was willing to trust absolutely, and she was even willing to bet her life to trust him. Yang Chun's performance showed that this demonic's alluring dance was not simple. Gong Sunling also suppressed her doubts and began to pay attention to those dance postures seriously. After dancing for half an instant stick of time, the sound of stringed and bamboo instruments began to slowly change, and the dancing Jidan women also had a little more ambiguous atmosphere. In the hall, there was a burst of women's tired breathing. It seemed that they were also very tired from this dance. After a while, the dancers seemed to be more tired, and their breathing became more and more frequent. On their heads and faces, some fine beads of sweat began to appear, and there was some redness on their faces. The atmosphere seemed to begin to change at this time. The dancers' bodies were tired, and their bodies also felt a little hot. The robes that were tightly covered just now were also quietly pulled open a little at the neckline, revealing a touch of white breasts and a corner of the various colored dadu. The body fragrance of the girls also slightly spread out with the sweat of their bodies, slowly filling the hall. The aroma billowed, and the hall was suddenly filled with an enchanting atmosphere. Even if she had been staring at these dancers, Gong Sunling did not notice when they secretly pulled up their necklines. And as the dance gradually entered a wonderful state, the dancers' necklines seemed to be getting bigger and bigger, almost revealing half of their chests. Suddenly, a dancer seemed to be tripped by something, and her body was crooked. Unfortunately, a dancer next to her may be too tired and accidentally stepped on the corner of her clothes hanging low on the ground. With a rip, the clothes of the crooked dancer were directly torn open, almost revealing half of her body. The poor dancer was almost in a flurry in an instant, trying to pull the remaining half of her clothes to cover her naked body, but the remaining half of the clothes was too small to cover it all. What was most worrying was that she had to dance along with everyone else in a flurry of concealment. Suddenly, a beautiful scene flashed by. The dancer was so anxious that she almost cried. The affection on her face was pitiful. Maybe she was afraid of the despotic power of Lady Fanghua, but she did not dare to stop dancing at all and could only cover up secretly. But the more so, the more people's hearts were moved. When one person's movements were messy, it immediately affected others. Rip, there was another sound, and the clothes of another dancer were also torn. The whole movement was chaotic. In an instant, all the dancers' faces showed a look of extreme horror, as if they would face terrible punishment if they danced disorderly. But no one could restore the original neatness. After a few movements, the third dancer was tripped by the cloth on the ground, and her body was crooked. She fell to the side of Yang Chun, just at the feet of Yang Chun. "Young master, help me." When the flustered dancer raised her head, what was presented in front of Gong Sunling was a pear blossom with a rainy face, an anxious expression. She opened her mouth and quickly put on a few mouth shapes, but did not dare to make any sound. Gong Sunling could guess the words of the dancer by the shape of her mouth. Suddenly, Gong Sunling's sympathy was great, and she could not help but reach out to pull the woman up. The woman may have sprained her ankle when she fell. As soon as her feet landed, her body softened, and she fell into the arms of Gong Sunling. Gong Sunling was quick. She held the woman. The breath of the woman rushed. It was like a ghost. She took the initiative to hug the woman's slender waist. She reached out and wiped the tears on the woman's face. She took the initiative to kiss the woman's cherry lips. She softly comforted. "Don't be afraid. I am here." Alas! Yang Chen's sigh resounded in Gong Sunling's ears. Gong Sunling's brain shook, and she suddenly woke up. The poor woman was still in her arms, but Gong Sunling no longer had the sympathy just now. She only felt that she was holding a beautiful snake. Suddenly, she pushed the woman out. Chapter 722. If it weren't for Yang Chen's sigh, Gong Sunling would even do more outrageous things unconsciously because of sympathy for the dancer. Fortunately, it was just a kiss, and Yang Chen called her back in time. Gong Sunling was still blushing. She couldn't resist the temptation in front of Yang Chen and kissed a woman of the demon sect. When she thought of this, Gong Sunling even had an urge to die. Even if she was defeated by an enemy and there was no hope for revenge, Gong Sunling had never been so desperate. She actually made a fool of herself in front of Yang Chen. How should she face Yang Chen in the future? Don't be discouraged. Yang Chen's voice seemed to ring in Gong Sunling's heart. The heavenly demon's alluring dance is to speculate on people's minds. Even the masters of the Yuanying and Deshang stages dare not try it easily. You have done very well. Despite Yang Chen's timely comfort, Gong Sunling still blamed herself and was so anxious that her tears were about to flow down. She actually made such a fool of herself in front of a group of demon sect women. In the future, how could she raise her head in the future? A Ling, this is a rare opportunity to hone your mind. Don't make a mistake. Yang Chen's voice was a little more serious this time, and there was a faint majesty in his voice. If you regard me as your husband, then be obedient. This sentence was more effective than any comfort. Gong Sunling suddenly restrained her expression. After concentrating again, she looked at the field again. Yang Chen said that he would marry Gao Yu and herself when he went back, so Yang Chen was naturally her husband. Gong Sunling could ignore other things, but she must listen to Yang Chen's words. In her subconscious, Gong Sunling thought so. Moreover, what Yang Chen said was very reasonable. The demonic's alluring dance wasn't something that just anyone could see. Although he didn't control himself just now, he had to be extra careful. It might be a good opportunity to hone his mental state. The woman giggled and returned to the group. The music changed again, and the style of the dance changed again. All the dancers took out a pink pill from somewhere on their bodies and put it into their mouths. After swallowing it in one gulp, the women quickly changed. The music was full of temptation, and the women began to moan. Along with their soul-stirring moans, faint pink smoke came out of their mouths. The pink mist quickly filled the entire hall, causing the female dancers in the middle to look a little hazy. Gong Sunling inhaled a little, and suddenly a burst of thoughts rose in her heart. She knew that this pink mist was not a good thing, so she hurriedly used her martial arts to get rid of it. After paying a little attention to Yang Chen, Gong Sunling found that Yang Chen still had that kind of expression of watching with interest. It seemed that he hadn't moved at all. Yang Chen's eyes seemed to keep sweeping over the naked parts of the dancers, which made Gong Sunling unhappy. Yang Chen's hand seemed to have once again embraced Gong Sunling's slender waist. At this moment, it was a little unruly. His fingers caressed her waist and abdomen at will, making Gong Sunling feel a burst of blush and her heart beat like thunder. However, when Gong Sunling was changed by Yang Chen, she accidentally saw the face of Lady Fanghua standing next to her. On the face of Lady Fanghua, there seemed to be a contemptuous smile. Gong Sunling's heart was shocked, and her mind returned to sobriety again. At this moment, Gong Sunling really calmed down, and her sea of consciousness was clear. Although the dancing of these people outside was moving, and the air was also filled with an obscene atmosphere, it could no longer affect Gong Sunling. After the spiritual awareness double cultivation with Yang Chen, the powerful role of the highest mystery Yin-Yang Heart Sutra finally manifested. The spiritual awareness was much stronger than her own cultivation base. And after the condensation of the highest mystery Yin-Yang Heart Sutra, her sea of consciousness was unparalleled. After being stimulated several times in a row, Gong Sunling finally woke up from the state of being easily tempted and began to clearly understand herself. She knew who she was, what she was doing here, and what the situation was now. When she understood this, everything outside naturally would not have any impact on Gong Sunling. Just this realization made Gong Sunling's spiritual awareness cultivation base rise to a small level again, and even the spiritual power of her whole body began to surge and flow constantly. In the eyes of outsiders, Gong Sunling had already mobilized her spiritual power to compete with the heavenly demons' alluring dance. Seeing this situation, Lady Fanghua laughed in her heart. How many people wanted to rely on this method to resist the heavenly demons' alluring dance, but no one could succeed. The heavenly demons' alluring dance was not aimed at the other's cultivation base, but the other's state of mind. How could it be resisted by relying on spiritual power? On the contrary, Yang Chen had been guarding his soul. Even if his desire had been aroused, he would rather touch and release on Gong Sunling's body, and he still insisted on not losing himself. This made Lady Fanghua couldn't help but look up to him. Cultivating the Jade Law, at least for 100 years, you have to endure the pain of burning desire, but you can't vent it. It was normal to have this kind of determination. Even in this stage of the heavenly demons' alluring dance, some simple aphrodisiac drugs have been used to enhance the power, but it has not reached the strongest moment. She believed that at that point, not to mention Yang Chen, even if the old devil himself came, he would also die on the spot. Fanghua, their strength is not enough. It's a little regretful. While thinking, Yang Chen suddenly opened his mouth and spoke directly to Lady Fanghua. This is already the best disciple at the heavenly demons' alluring dance under this slave. Lady Fanghua finally showed a difficult expression. It was not that she didn't want to do a better effect, but the strength of these disciples was really limited. The best. Yang Chen smiled slightly and suddenly said with some meaning, "Not necessarily. Where else?" Lady Fanghua smiled bitterly and when she was about to refute, she suddenly thought of something. She widened her eyebrows, turned to Yang Chun, and asked in surprise, "Young master, you don't want me to do it myself, do you?" Yang Chun stared at the noble face of Lady Fanghua, did not speak, and just nodded silently. "Young master, why do you want to humiliate me like this?" On the face of Lady Fanghua, there was a sudden sadness, and she pleaded softly, "To dance the heavenly demon's alluring dance, I have to take a temporary dispersing pill. I also have to swallow an aphrodisiac, and I have no clothes to cover my body. I am a pure woman. Young master, do you really have the heart to let me do such a lowly thing?" A high and mighty Yuanying stage ancestor had to take a dispersing pill, temporarily limit her spiritual power, and then swallow an aphrodisiac to dance in sexy clothes. It was hard to believe. Lady Fanghua looked at Yang Chen's eyes at the moment, full of sincerity. A lady, looking at Yang Chen pitifully, just wanted to ask him not to let her dance the heavenly demon's alluring dance. Chapter 723. For a moment, Gong Sunling looked at this aggrieved face, and a trace of pleading flashed in her mind, but it was quickly suppressed. This was the territory of the devil sect. Yang Chun and she were facing an elder of the peak Yuanying stage of Yin Yang Demon School. How credible were her words? If Gong Sunling was soft-hearted because of her words, then she was the biggest fool. Boring. Yang Chun suddenly became dispirited and yawned. "You want to play the game, but now you don't want to play it. It's really boring." Yang Chen's words, however, hit the heart of Lady Fanghua. Even if she wanted to plot against Yang Chun, Lady Fanghua would not put herself under Yang Chun and be his slave. In addition to monitoring Yang Chun, there was also a leisurely game of Lady Fanghua. People were used to being high and mighty. Occasionally changing their identity, they could flirt with a noble young master like Yang Chun and play a game of mutual conquest, which was also very interesting. Now that Yang Chun said this, Lady Fanghua could only go to the heavenly demon's alluring dance, no matter how wrong she was. However, before she left to prepare, she was taken down by two female dancers who were dancing. Looking at the excited look of the two female dancers, it seemed that they also wanted to see Lady Fanghua fall into the same situation as them. Lady Fanghua, who was always high and mighty, stood at the door of the hall at the moment, looking at Yang Chun with a face full of grievances, looking pitifully at him. In her body, there was no longer a strong and unparalleled spiritual power, and there was no pressure of a Yuanying stage ancestor. Now she, after taking the scattering skill pill, seemed to be just a weak woman. On Lady Fanghua's body, it was no longer her original luxurious dress, but it was replaced by the same one as the current female dancers, which was torn in half and could not cover her body at all. The spring scenery was exposed and looming. It was not known if Lady Fanghua had ever had the experience of exposing her body in front of man. Anyway, at this moment, her performance was more unbearable than those female dancers. Her face was flushed, and she had an aggrieved expression on her face. Her hands kept moving around on her body, as if she wanted to stretch the torn piece of cloth that was only the size of a few palms to cover her whole body. Or was there any mood to dance? In addition to the panic, Madame Fanghua only kept covering the parts of her body. The surrounding female dancers seemed to find opportunities, and from time to time, they would take the opportunity to lift a certain piece of cloth on her body, causing Lady Fanghua to scream and hurriedly cover it. Not long after, amidst the groans of the female dancers, there was a tender and panic-stricken cry. Lady Fanghua, who was in a hurry, could not care about dancing. She could only keep moving, interfering with the movements of other dancers. After every scream, Lady Fanghua would cast a pleading look at Yang Chun, as if she wanted Yang Chun to speak and save her from such an embarrassing situation. Looking around, even if he had a heart of stone, it seemed that he could not bear to watch such a beauty endure such an insult, and he could not wait to hold her in his arms and comfort her. Gong Sunling next to him, even if she always felt that Lady Fanghua was very hateful, but at this moment, she could not bear to watch her fall into such a situation. She seemed to have forgotten to plead with Yang Chun. She just stared at the half-naked figure being bullied by the female dancers with a distressed and pitiful expression, looking at it foolishly. Yang Chun, who was next to her, did not react at all. He just watched quietly, but there was a hint of appreciation and admiration in his eyes. There was a trace of appreciation and admiration in her eyes. The masters were really different. Madame Fanghua had only been out for a long time, and she had already completely fascinated Gong Sunling. Although Gong Sunling had experienced the heavenly demon's alluring dance under the reminder of Yang Chun not long ago, and improved her state of mind a little, when Lady Fanghua the peak Yuanying stage came down, she still easily confused Gong Sunling. Whether it was the cultivation of spiritual power or spiritual awareness, Gong Sunling was not the opponent of Lady Fanghua. In terms of reading people's minds, the slightly naive Gong Sunling was even less than 5% of Lady Fanghua, who had been in the demon realm for many years. Fortunately, Lady Fanghua's main goal was still Yang Chun, otherwise she would have easily cleaned up Gong Sunling. When Yang Chun admired Lady Fanghua was also secretly admiring Yang Chun. When others saw her so wronged appearance, they couldn't help but pull her into their arms, but Yang Chun seemed to have nothing happened. He still sat there and slowly tasted the wine. The more this was the case, the more Lady Fanghua felt that she had met her match. She used all her skills to play a weak and helpless noble woman. However, what she got in return was Yang Chen's smiling and appreciative gaze. Lady Fanghua couldn't help but be a little angry. Even if Yang Chun cultivated the jade cultivation method since he was a child, he had a strong will, and he could endure the pain of burning desire for 100 years, but he was just a junior in the early gold course stage. He could actually ignore her demon's alluring dance. How could it not make Lady Fanghua angry? However, the angrier she was, the more wronged Lady Fanghua's face was. Under her signal, the other female dancers also became more and more presumptuous. Intentionally or unintentionally, they tore off a few pieces of covering on her body, leaving only a few key places and some cloth, which made her look more and more charming. As the pink mist diffused, Lady Fanghua's eyes also began to blur. It was no longer the kind of unwilling look under coercion. It slowly turned into a state of losing nature under the influence of the aphrodisiac and began to enter the realm of spiritual and physical intercourse. However, Lady Fanghua still seemed to have a trace of intelligence. In her blurred eyes, there would occasionally be a pleading light, as if Yang Chun was her savior. As long as he could save her from this suffering, she was willing to pay any price. If he could make the arrogant Lady Fanghua bow her head, it meant that the game between Yang Chun and Lady Fanghua would eventually end with Yang Chen's temporary victory. And this opportunity seemed to be available as long as Yang Chun stretched out his hand. Yang Chun had been staring at Lady Fanghua closely. At this moment, he took a long breath and sighed in a low voice, "It's really powerful." With a groan, Lady Fanghua over there was finally completely lost in the aphrodisiac. A few small pieces of cloth on her body were also quickly taken away. Her naked body was hugged by two equally naked female dancers. For jade hands began to wander around her body, playing with her. A soul-stirring moan came from Lady Fanghua's cherry mouth. Her delicate body instantly became stiff, showing a breathtaking beauty. Yang Chen's eyes suddenly shot out two rays of light. This was the right time to make a move.